And so we'll be reading tonight the Lost Book of Enki here. This is the introduction. Some 445,000 years ago, astronauts from another planet came to Earth in search of gold. Splashing down in one of the Earth's seas, they waded ashore and established Eridu, home in the faraway. In time, the initial settlement expanded to a full-fledged mission Earth with a mission control center, a spaceport, mining operations, and even a way station on Mars. And there's lots of evidence of that. I mean, it absolutely is to me no coincidence. And anybody wants to make you believe it's a coincidence is a liar. That the original area of what is now Iraq, formerly Mesopotamia, was called, before it was Mesopotamia, was called Cydonia. Sorry, I had a brain fart there for a minute. And the area also on Mars where the face was found is also on Cydonia. Coincidentally enough, both places are also located on the 33rd degree parallel. Yes, you heard me right. Ancient Mesopotamia was, or is also, Iraq, also located on the 33rd degree parallel, formerly known as Cydonia. Cydonia on Mars, where the face is located, is also on the 33rd degree parallel. As we talked about earlier with 33, no coincidence, ladies and gentlemen. So, I got to say the idea of the way station thing, definitely a lot of evidence to support that. Short of manpower, the astronauts employed genetic engineering to fashion primitive workers, Homo sapiens. It says Horno sapiens, so maybe that's a misprint. Homo sapiens. The deluge that catastrophically swept over the Earth required a fresh start. The astronauts became gods, granting mankind civilization, teaching it to worship. Then, about 4,000 years ago, all that had been achieved unraveled in a nuclear calamity brought about by the visitors to Earth in the course of their own rivalries and wars. Exactly what I talked about earlier. So that's coincidental yet again. This is going to be a good read, I think. I can already tell. We're starting to see synchronicities already. Exactly what I described earlier with the Bhagavad Gita. The pre-flood ash. What had taken place on Earth, and especially the events since human history began, has been culled by Zecharia Sitchin in his The Earth Chronicle series from the Bible, clay tablets, ancient myths, and archaeological discoveries. But what had preceded the events on Earth, what had taken place on the astronauts' own planet Nibiru that caused the space journeys, the need for gold, the creation of man, what emotions, rivalries, beliefs, morals, or lack thereof motivated the principal players in the celestial and space sagas? What were the relationships that caused mounting tensions on Nibiru and on Earth? What tensions arose between old and young, between those who had come from Nibiru and those who were born on Earth? And to what extent was what happened determined by destiny, a destiny whose record of past events holds the key to the future? Would it not be auspicious were one of the key players an eyewitness and one who could distinguish between fate and destiny to record for posterity the how and where and when and why of it all, the first things and perhaps the last things? But that is precisely what some of them did do, and foremost among them was the very leader who had commanded the first group of astronauts. Scholars and theologians alike now recognize that the biblical tales of creation, of Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, the Deluge, the Tower of Babel, were based on texts written down millennia earlier in Mesopotamia. Now, keep in mind as well, folks, this is, again, why in 2003, in the invasion of Iraq, they went into the Iraq National Museum, stole all the artifacts pertaining to ancient Mesopotamia, the little reptilian alien statues, all the cylinder seals, all that stuff. This is why. And so the Adam and Eve, the tales of creation, the Garden of Eden, the Deluge, the Tower of Babel, were based on texts written down millennia earlier in Mesopotamia, especially by the Sumerians. And they, in turn, clearly stated that they obtained their knowledge of past events, many from a time before civilizations began, even before mankind came to be, from the writings of the Anunnaki. From those from heaven to earth came the gods of antiquity. As a result of a century and a half of archaeological discoveries in the ruins of the ancient civilizations, especially in the Near East, a great number of such early texts have been found. The finds have also revealed the extent of missing texts, so-called lost books, which are either mentioned in discovered texts or are inferred from such texts, or that are known to have existed because they were cataloged in royal or temple libraries. Sometimes the secrets of the gods were partly revealed in epic tales, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. That disclosed the debate among the gods that led to the decision to let mankind perish in the deluge, or in a text titled Atra Hasis, which recalled the mutiny of the Anunnaki who had toiled in the gold mines that led to the creation of primitive worker earthlings. From time to time, the leaders of the astronauts themselves authored compositions, sometimes dictating the text to a chosen scribe, as the text called the Era Epos, in which one of the two gods who had caused the nuclear calamity sought to shift the blame to his adversary. Sometime the god acted as his own scribe, as is the case regarding the Book of the Secrets of Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, which the god had secreted in a subterranean chamber. When the Lord God Yahweh, according to the Bible, granted the commandments to his chosen people, he first inscribed in his own hand 2 stone tablets that he gave to Moses on Mount Sinai. When Moses threw down and broke that first set of tablets in response to the golden calf incident, the replacement set was written by Moses on the tablets on both their sides when he stayed on the mount 40 days and 40 nights, recording the dictated words of the Lord. Were it not for a tale recorded on papyrus from the time of the Egyptian king Khufu concerning the Book of the Secrets of Thoth, the existence of that book would have not become known. Were it not for the biblical narratives in Exodus and Deuteronomy, we would have never known about the divine tablets and their contents. All would have become part of the enigmatic body of lost books whose very existence would have never come to light. No less painful is the fact that in some instances we do know that certain texts had existed, but are in the dark regarding their contents. Such is the case regarding the Book of the Wars of Yahweh and the Book of Dasher, or also known as the Book of Righteousness, which are specifically mentioned in the Bible. In at least 2 instances, the existence of olden books, earlier texts known to the biblical narrator, can be inferred chapter 5 of Genesis with the statement, "This is the book of the Toldoth of Adam." The term Toldoth being usually translated as generations, but more accurately meaning historic or genealogical record. Yeah, the book of, the Adamic, the record of Adam, or the genealogy of Isis. That's what it really means. That's what the book of Genesis means. So that's interesting that chapter 5 of Genesis begins with the statement, "This is the book of Toldoth of Adam," of the Toldoth of Adam, meaning the genealogical record of Adam. Well, Adam supposedly is is what we know in Egyptian mythology as you have Isis, Osiris, and Horus. And that's the Trinity. That's where what we know as the Holy Trinity comes from. It's just amazing stuff. Wow. So that's exactly what the book of Genesis means, yeah. So this is the book of Toldoth of Adam, the term Toldoth being usually translated as generations or meaning historic or genealogical record. The other instances in chapter 6 of Genesis where the events concerning Noah and the deluge begin with the words, "These are the Toldoth of Noah." Indeed, partial versions of a book that became known as the Book of Adam and Eve have survived over the millennia in Armenian, Slovak, Syriac, and Ethiopic languages. And the Book of Enoch, one of the so-called apocryphal books that were not included in the canonized Bible. They contain segments that are considered by scholars to be fragments of a much earlier book of Noah. An oft-quoted example of the extent of lost books is that of the famed Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Established by the general Ptolemy after Alexander's death in 323 BC, it was said to have contained more than 500,000 volumes of books inscribed on a variety of materials, clay, stone, papyrus, parchment, etc. That great library, where scholars gathered to study the accumulated knowledge, was burnt down and destroyed in the wars that extended from 48 BC to the Arab conquest in AD 642. What has remained of its treasures is a translation of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible into Greek and fragments retained in the writings of some of the library's resident scholars. It is only thus that we know that the second King Ptolemy commissioned, circa 270 BC, an Egyptian priest whom the Greeks called Mantho, to compile the history and prehistory of Egypt. At first, Mantho wrote, only the gods reigned there, then demigods, and finally, circa 3100 BC, pharaonic dynasties began. The divine reigns, he wrote, began 10,000 years before the flood and continued for thousands of years thereafter, the latter period having witnessed battles and wars among the gods. In the Asiatic domains of Alexander, where reign fell into the hands of the general, Seleucus and his successors, a similar effort to provide the Greek servants with a record of past events took place. A priest of the Babylonian god Marduk, Berosus, with access to libraries of clay tablets whose core was the temple library of Haran, now in southeastern Turkey, wrote down in 3 volumes a history of gods and men that began 432,000 years before the deluge, when the gods came to earth from the heavens, listing by name and reign durations the first 10 commanders. Berosus reported that the first leader, dressed as a fish, waded ashore from the sea. He was the one who gave mankind civilization, and his name, rendered in Greek, was Cans. Dovetailing in many details, both priests thus rendered accounts of gods of heaven who had come to earth of a time when gods alone reigned on earth, and of the catastrophic deluge. In the fragmentary bits and pieces retained in other contemporary writings from the 3 volumes, Berosus specifically reported the existence of writings from before the great flood stone tablets that were hidden for safekeeping in an ancient city called Sippar, one of the original cities established by the ancient gods. Though Sippar, as were other pre-diluvial cities of the gods, was overwhelmed and obliterated by the deluge, a reference to the pre-diluvial writings surfaced in the annals of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal when archaeologists in the 19th century found the ancient Assyrian capital, Nineveh. Until then known only from the Old Testament, they discovered in the ruins of a palace with the remains of some 25,000 inscribed clay tablets. An assiduous collector of olden texts, Ashurbanipal boasted in his annals, "The God of scribes has bestowed upon me the gift of the knowledge of his arts. I have been initiated into the secrets of writing. I can even read the intricate tablets in Sumerian. I understand the enigmatic words in the stone carvings from the days before the flood." It is now known that the Sumerian or Sumerian civilization had blossomed in what is now Iraq almost a millennium before the beginning of the Pharaonic age in Egypt, both to be followed later by the civilization of the Indus Valley in the Indian subcontinent. It is now also known that the Sumerians were the first to write down the annals of tales of gods and men, from which all other peoples, including the Hebrews, obtained the tales of creation of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the deluge, the Tower of Babel, and of the wars and loves of the gods, as reflected in the writings and recollections of the Greeks, Hittites, Canaanites, Persians, and Indo-Europeans. As all these olden writings attest, their sources were even earlier texts, some found, but many lost. The volume of such early writings is staggering. Not thousands, but tens of thousands of clay tablets have been discovered in the ruins of the ancient Near East. Many deal with or record aspects of daily life, such as trade or workers' wages and nuptial contracts. Others, found mostly in palace libraries, constitute royal annals. Still others, discovered in the ruins of temple libraries or of scribal schools, constitute a group of canonized texts. A secret literature that were written down in the Sumerian language and then translated to Akkadian, the first Semitic language, and then other ancient languages. And even in those early writings going back almost 6,000 years, references are made to lost books, texts inscribed on the stone tablets. Among the incredible, to say fortunate, does not fully convey the miracle finds in the ruins of ancient cities and their libraries. there are clay prisms inscribed with the very information about the 10 pre-Diluvian rulers and their 432,000 years total reign to which Berosus had referred, known as the Sumerian king lists. Let me get a drink here. Known as the Sumerian king lists and on display in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, England, their several versions leave no doubt that the Sumerian compilers had access to some earlier common or canonized textual material. Coupled with other equally early texts discovered in various states of preservation, they strongly suggest that the original recorder of the arrival, as well as of the preceding events and certainly of the following events, had to be one of those leaders, a key participant and an eyewitness. One who had been an eyewitness to all those events. Indeed, a key participant in them was the leader who had splashed down with the first group of astronauts. At that time, his epitaph name was Ea, E-A, he whose home is water. He experienced the disappointment of having command of Earth mission given to his half-brother and rival Enlil, Lord of the Command. A humiliation little mitigated by granting him the title Enki, Lord of Earth. Relegated away from the cities of the gods and their spaceport in the Eden, E-D-I-N, which, of course, Eden, to supervise the mining of gold in the Abzu, which was in southeastern Africa. It was Ea Enki, a great scientist who came across the hominids who inhabited those parts. And so when the Anunnaki toiling in the gold mines mutinied and said, "No more," it was he who realized that the needed manpower could be obtained by jumping the gun on evolution through genetic engineering, and thus did the Adam, literally, he of the earth, earthling, came into being. As a hybrid, the Adam could not procreate. The events echoed in the biblical tale of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden record the second genetic manipulation by Enki that added the extra chromosomal genes needed for sexual procreation. And when mankind proliferating did not turn out the way it had been envisaged, it was he, Enki, who defied his brother Enlil's plans to let mankind perish in the deluge. The events whose hero has been called Noah in the Bible and Zusudra in the earlier original Sumerian text. The firstborn son of Anu, Nibiru's ruler Ea Enki, was well versed in his planets and its inhabitants' past. And this is where I start to already have problems with this. I'm not convinced that they were. I don't believe 100% what they tell us. Anunnaki came from Nibiru and all that. I don't believe that. I still think that's a red herring. But that's what you always see Sitchin referring to. And I still just don't. The archaeological stuff doesn't point in that direction. It points more in the direction of Sirius or Cygnus or Polaris. I mean, it just doesn't point in the direction of some planet that we have. We may or may not have ever even really identified. We have hard evidence that points archaeological things like the pyramids and Göbekli Tepe, and I mean, you've got all these ancient megalithic sites all around the world lined up to stars, to certain systems. And then you see things like the Freemasons being obsessed with Sirius and the whole star system's there, and then the Dogon. And I mean, I just have a hard time believing that the Anunnaki came. They just don't seem to have come from within our own solar system. I have a hard time believing that. An accomplished scientist, he bequeathed his most important aspects of advanced knowledge of the Anunnaki, especially to his two sons, Marduk and Ningishzida, who as Egyptian gods were known there as Ra and Thoth, respectively. But he also was instrumental in sharing with mankind certain aspects of such advanced knowledge by teaching to selected individuals the secrets of the gods. In at least two instances, such initiates wrote down, as they were instructed to do, those divine teachings as mankind's heritage. Right, that's what I was referencing earlier in the show, our birthright. That's what they were instructing him to write down. One called Adapa, and probably a son of Enki by a human female, is known to have written a book titled Writings Regarding Time, one of the earliest lost books. The other, called the Edmund Durang, let me get this right, the Enmed Uranki, the Enmed Uranki, Enmeduranki, the Enmed Uranki, another one of the books that was supposed to be our birthright, was in all probability the prototype of the biblical Enoch, the one who was taken up into heaven after he had entrusted his sons the book of divine secrets, and of which a version has possibly survived in the extra-biblical book of Enoch. Though the firstborn of Anu, he was not destined to be his father's successor on the throne of Nibiru. Complex rules of succession, which reflected the convoluted history of their planet, gave the privilege to Enki's half-brother Enlil. And Enlil is also that's where the whole thing of, Jesus and the devil comes from, that whole dynamic. That's in Enlil and Enki. That's what the two twin towers represented, Enlil and Enki. It's a pretty good signal of bringing those things down, bringing down Enlil and Enki, that, these custodial rulers definitely, you want to get down to who really pulled off 9/11, there you go. In the effort to resolve the bitter conflict, both Enki and Enlil ended up on a mission to an alien planet Earth, whose goal was needed to create a shield for preserving Nibiru's dwindling atmosphere. It was against that background, made even more complex by the presence on Earth of their half-sister Ninarshag, the chief medical officer of the Anunnaki, that Enki decided to defy Enlil's plans to have mankind perish in the deluge. The conflict carried on between the two half-brothers' sons, even among their grandchildren. The fact that all of them, and especially those born on Earth, faced the loss of longevity that Nibiru's extended orbital period provided, added personal agonies and sharpened ambitions. It all came to a climax in the last century of the third millennium BC, when Marduk, Enki's firstborn by his official spouse, claimed that he and not Enlil's firstborn son, Ninurta, should inherit the earth. The bitter conflict that included a series of wars led in the end to the use of nuclear weapons. And that's what I was mentioning earlier when the listener had asked me about, the sun symbols. And that's why I said I think it has something to do with nuclear weapons and extraterrestrials, because, Polaris, the long-range nuclear missiles launched by submarines, and also the, just the whole thing with how they use nuclear weapons on Earth. And that being the North Star and all those, sun symbols. Again, when you see those depictions of the sun in Egyptian things or anything else, it's not, that doesn't always mean our sun or our star. It could mean someone else's a star somewhere else. That's what people never think. They never teach you that in school. People need to know that information. It's very key. It changes everything once you know that. The bitter conflict that included a series of wars led to the end of the use of nuclear weapons. The ensuing, though unintended, result was the demise of the Sumerian civilization. And that's true, because that's one of the things that they will admit to, actually, in a high school textbook. The Sumerians disappeared. Gone, poof, in the wind, in the dust. Some people think they got raptured out by aliens, but I think probably the more, I think what I believe is that they were vaporized by the use of these extraterrestrial nuclear weapons. And again, the reason I believe that is because, as we talked about earlier, the pre-flood ash. The initiation of chosen individuals into the secrets of the gods had marked the beginning of priesthood, the lineages of mediators between the gods and the people, the transmitters of the divine words to the mortal earthlings. Oracles' interpretations of divine utterances were commingled with the observation of the heavens for omens. And as mankind was increasingly drawn to take sides in the godly conflicts, prophecy began to play a role. Indeed, the term to denote such spokesmen of the gods who proclaimed what was to come, Nabi, was the epitaph for Marduk's firstborn son, Nabu, who had tried on behalf of his exiled father to convince mankind that the heavenly signs bespoke the coming supremacy of Marduk. These developments sharpen the realization that one must distinguish between fate and destiny. The proclamations of Enlil, sometimes even of Anu, that used to be unquestioned were now subjected to the scrutiny of the difference between Nam and destiny, like the planetary orbits, whose course had been determined and was unchangeable, and Namtar, literally, a destiny that could be bent, broken, changed, which was fate. Reviewing and recalling the sequence of events and the apparent parallelism between what had happened on Nibiru and what took place on Earth, Enki and Enlil began to ponder philosophically what indeed was destined and could not have been avoided, and what was just fated as a consequence of right or wrong decisions and free choice. The latter could not be predicted. The former could be foreseen, especially if all, as the planetary orbits, was cyclical. If what was shall be again, if the first things shall also be the last things. The climactic event of the nuclear desolation sharpened soul-searching among the leaders of the Anunnaki and raised the need to explain to the devastated human masses why it came to pass this way. Was it destined, or was it just the result of an Anunnaki-made fate? Was anyone responsible? Is there someone accountable? In the councils of the Anunnaki on the eve of the calamity, it was Enki who stood alone in opposition to the use of the forbidden weapon. It was thus important for Enki to explain to the suffering remnants that the turning point in the saga of extraterrestrials, who had meant well but ended as destroyers, had come to pass, and who but Ea Enki, who was the first to come and be an eyewitness to it all, was the most qualified to tell the people so that the future could be divined. And what was the best way to tell that it was all a first-person report by Enki himself? This is kind of in broken English. I apologize. I know how to read, but and the best way to tell it was all as a first-person report by Enki himself. It's just, I don't think Zecharia Sitchin spoke good English. I'm reading it exactly as it is on the page, and some of this stuff I'm having to improvise because it's just bad English. I hate that. It's like every time I find a book I want to read, it's written by a fucking first grader. Sucks. That he had recorded his autobiography is certain, for a long text stretching over at least 12 tablets was discovered in a library. Nippur quotes Enki as saying, "When I approached the earth, there was much flooding. When I neared its green meadows, heaps and mounds were piled up at my command. In a pure place, I built my house. An appropriate name I gave it." The long text continues to describe how Ea, or Enki, then assigned tasks to his lieutenants, putting their mission to Earth in motion. Numerous other texts that relate varied aspects of Enki's role in the ensuing developments serve to complete Enki's tale. They include a cosmogony, an epic of creation at whose core lay Enki's own text, which scholars call the Eridu Genesis. They include detailed descriptions of the fashioning of the atom. They describe how other Anunnaki, male and female, came to Enki in his city Eridu to obtain from him the Me, a kind of data disk that encoded all aspects of civilization, and they include text of Enki's private life and personal problems, such as the tale of his attempts to attain a son by his half-sister Ninarshak, his promiscuous affair with both goddesses and the daughters of man, and the unforeseen consequences thereof. The Atra Hasis text throws light on Anu's efforts to prevent a flare-up of the Enki-Enlil rivalries by dividing Earth's domains between them. And texts recording the events preceding the deluge render almost verbatim the debates in the Council of the Gods about the fate of mankind and Enki's subterfuge known as the Tale of Noah and the Ark tale known from the Bible, until one of its original Mesopotamian versions was found in the tablets in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Sumerian and Akkadian clay tablets, Babylonian and Assyrian temple libraries, Egyptian, Hittite, and Canaanite myths, and the biblical narratives are the main body of written down memories of the affairs of gods and men. For the first time ever, this dispersed and fragmented material has been assembled and used by Zecharia Sitchin to recreate the eyewitness accounts of Enki, the autobiographical memoirs and insightful prophecies of an extraterrestrial God. Presented as a text dictated by Enki to a chosen scribe, a book of witnessing to the unsealed, to be unsealed at an appropriate time. It brings to mind Yahweh's instructions to the prophet Isaiah. Now come, write it on a sealed tablet as a book and engrave it. Let it be the witnessing until the last day, a testimony for all time. In dealing with the past, Enki himself perceived the future. The notion that the Anunnaki, exercising free will, were masters of their own fates, as well as the fate of mankind, gave way in the end to a realization that it was destiny, that when all was said and done, determined the course of events, and therefore, as the Hebrew prophets had recognized, the first things shall be the last things. The record of events dictated by Enki thus becomes a foundation for prophecy, and the past becomes the future. So that's the end there of the first part. This is, I'm going to try, I've got a hard copy of this. I just pulled up a PDF. Maybe this is a crappy PDF. I don't know. I'll find a better copy before next show. But yeah, I mean, looks like it's good stuff so far here. And, you know, again, don't agree with all the stuff about Nibiru, blah, 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 whatever. But still, nonetheless, I think it's going to be very well worth the read, and definitely can't wait to get into that. Got an email here that says, hey, Josh, I'd like to know what you think about the Kabbalistic writings of Aleister Crowley. Was he just misleading, or was he just omitting? Crowley was a trickster. That was part of his whole shtick, his whole persona, his whole thing. You couldn't tell when the guy was telling you the truth or whether he was, you know, pulling your leg. And so one of the things you find, and which is exactly the reason why I can't answer your question, because was he just misleading? Was he just omitting? Well, or was he doing both? That's a question you're going to have to find on your own, my friend. Because I'll tell you what I've found. I've found that the more that you find out about those things on your own, the different stuff that, you know, like, you know, Kabbalism and sacred magic and sex magic and, you know, any of the ancient, arts, and then you go back and read Crowley, you know, you start to get a better idea of what's what and what's not. I'll tell you this. I think the guy was way more powerful and had way more power and really, really had a lot more control over a lot more things than what the history books tell us. That's really what I can tell you. That's for sure. They try to downplay it a lot, but you know, understand he was the head of the Illuminati as well at one point. I think after Giuseppe Mazzini, something like that. I think Giuseppe Mazzini passed it to him after Albert Pike had passed it to Giuseppe Mazzini. So, yeah, I think that's one thing that, you know, that's a great question, but I think it's a question that, you know, I think I'd be doing you an injustice by really answering fully. And also, I think it's a question you're going to find on your own. You know, as you research more and you read more and you find out new things every day, that's going to change. You know, what you believe today about something, or what you understand today about, a specific issue we're talking about, it's going to change. No, it's not going to be the same a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, or it shouldn't be. If it is, then, you know, you're not really challenging yourself to have new beliefs and have new info. I think that as you continue to research and you continue to read more, you find the things that you thought you believed before, thought it held as, you know, that sort of changes and is constantly in flux because you're constantly learning new things. So, synopsis of the first tablet, lamentation over the desolation of Sumer. How the gods fled their cities as the nuclear cloud spread, the debates in the council of the gods, the fateful decision to unleash the weapons of terror, the origin of the gods and the awesome weapons on Nibiru, Nibiru's north-south wars, unification and dynastic rules, Nibiru's place in the solar system, a dwindling atmosphere causes climate changes, efforts to obtain gold to shield the atmosphere fail. Alalu, a usurper, uses nuclear weapons to stir volcanic gases. Anu, a dynastic heir, disposes Alalu. Alalu steals a spacecraft and escapes from Nibiru. The first tablet. So now we're reading from the first tablet. Here we go. The words of the Lord Enki, firstborn son of Anu, who reigns on Nibiru. With heavy spirit I utter laments. Laments that are bitter fill my heart. How smitten is the land, its people delivered to the evil wind, its stables abandoned, its sheepfolds empty. Yeah, it was, Samir was reduced to dust. That's why the Sumerians just disappeared. They got wiped out by a nuclear war. How smitten are the cities, their people piled up as dead corpses afflicted by the evil wind. How smitten are the fields, their vegetation withered, touched by the evil wind. How smitten are the rivers, nothing swims anymore, pure sparkling waters turned into poison. Of its black-headed people, Sumir is emptied, gone is all life. Of its cattle and sheep, Sumir is emptied, silent is the hum of churning milk. In its glorious cities, only the wind howls, death is the only smell. The temples whose heads to heaven arose by their gods have been abandoned. Of lordship and kingship command there is none, scepter and tiara are now gone. On the banks of the two great rivers, once lush and life-giving, only weeds grow. No one treads the highways, no one seeks out the roads. Flourishing Sumir is like an abandoned desert. How smitten is the land, home of gods and men. On that land a calamity fell, one unknown to man. A calamity that mankind had never before seen, one that could not be withstood. On all the lands from west to east, a disruptive hand of terror was placed. The gods in their cities were helpless as man. An evil wind, a storm born in a distant plain, a great calamity wrought in its path. A death-dealing wind born in the west, its way to the east has made, its course set by fate. A storm devouring as the deluge by wind and not by water, a destroyer by poisoned air, not tidal waves overwhelming. By fate, not destiny, was it engendered. The great gods and their council, the great calamity had caused. By Enlil and Nirhashag, it was permitted. I alone, for a halt, was beseeching. Day and night to accept what the heavens decree, I argue, to no avail. So he's basically saying he tried to stop it. They wouldn't listen to him. Ninurta, Enlil's warrior son, and Nergal, my very own son, poisoned weapons in the great plain, then unleashed them. That an evil wind shall follow the brilliance we knew not. Thy now cry in agony. They act like they didn't know what these weapons were going to do. They'd never used them before. You almost see them as almost in the same place that we are now with our technology. It's almost as if that's where they were at, a little bit more advanced than us. They could travel places, but but before anybody ever dropped a nuclear weapon, nobody knew what it was going to do, even though they had that technology, and knew about it, but just didn't, they didn't know. Seems like this was kind of the same way. In their holy cities, the gods stood disbelieving as the evil wind toward Sumer made its way. One after another, the gods fled their cities, their temples abandoned to the wind. In my city, Eridu, as the poison cloud approached, I could do nothing to stop it. Escape to the open steppe, to the people I gave instructions. With Ninki, my spouse, the city I abandoned. In his city, Nippur, place of the bond heaven earth, Enlil could do nothing to stop it. The evil wind against Nippur was onrushing in his celestial boat, UFO. Pretty clear, celestial boat. Give me a break. Enlil and his spouse hurriedly took off. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, the tough gods, these almighty, all-powerful, all-loving gods, puke. Drop nuclear weapons on us, then get in their fucking spaceships and haul ass out of here. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? As above, so below, right? Sounds like what they want to do to us. The past is prologue. Like what it said at the beginning of this, something to that effect. What's happened in the past determines the future. So the gods, the extraterrestrials, they dropped nuclear weapons on us and they hauled ass in their spaceships and got the fuck out of here and then, left us all down here to die. That very well could be what's going to happen again. A lot of evidence pointing that direction, isn't there? In Sumer's city of kingship, Nanar to his father Enlil for help cried. In the place of the temple that to the heaven in 7 steps rises, Nanar, the hand of fate, refused to heed. My father who begot me, great God who to had granted kingship, turn the evil wind away, Nanar pleaded. Great God who decrees the fates, let and its people be spared. Your praises to continue. Nanar appealed. Enlil answered his son, Nanar, noble son, your wondrous city kingship was granted. Eternal reign, it was not granted. Take hold of your spouse, Ningal, flee the city. Even I who decree fates, its destiny, I cannot bend. Thus did Enlil, my brother, speak. Alas, alas, not a destiny it was. A calamity none greater since the deluge, gods and earthlings has befallen. Alas, not a destiny it was. The great deluge was destined to happen. The great calamity of the death-dealing storm was not. So they're saying that, again, really reinforcing that idea that the great deluge, the great flood, was destined to happen, but the death-dealing storm was not. Well, what makes that interesting is that historically people are often confused. Because there was more than one great flood on this planet. There's more than one great deluge. And the reason that we know that is true scientifically is, again, because of that layer of pre-flood ash. So according to this, we have the great deluge. We had this great calamity of nuclear weapons unleashed, which, again, all across the earth, deep underground, there's a layer of pre-deluge, pre-flood ash. So according to this, we had a great deluge. We have the nuclear decimation of Earth, reducing it to ash. Then we had another flood after that at some point. And that's proven because it's proven that there was a flood after this event that caused the Earth to be reduced to ashes. That's very interesting. And you see that reference that there was more than one flood. You hear that talked about. By the breach of a vow, by a council decision, it was caused. By weapons of terror was it created. By a decision, not destiny, were the poisoned weapons unleashed. By deliberation was the lot cast. So they're saying that this was done with, impunity. This was done on purpose. There was no accident that these nuclear weapons were deployed. Against Marduk, my firstborn, did the 2 sons' destruction direct. Vengeance was in their hearts. Ascendancy is not Marduk's to grasp. Enlil's firstborn shouted, with weapons I shall oppose him, Ninurta said. Of people he raised an army, Babili as earth's navel to declare. Nergal, Marduk's brother, so shouted. In the council of the great gods, words of venom were spread. Day and night I raised my opposing voice. Peace I counsel, deploring haste. For the second time the people have raised his heavenly image. Why does opposing continue? I asked in pleading. Have all the instruments been checked? Did not the era of Marduk in the heavens arrive? I once more inquired. Ningish Zeta, my very son, other signs of heaven cited. His heart, I knew, Marduk's injustice to him could not forgive. Nanar to Enlil on earthborn was unrelenting too. Marduk, my temple in the north city, his own abode made, so he said. Ishkur, Enlil's youngest son, demanded punishment. In my lands to whore after him the people he made, he said. Utu, son of Nanar, Marduk's son Nabu, his wrath directed. And this goes on, and this is like on and on. This is like an argument. I'm going to fuck you up. No, I'm going to fuck you up. I'm going to fuck you up. No, I'm going to fuck you up. Pissing contest, essentially. Nergal, lord of the lower domain, ferociously was demanding, let the olden weapons of terror for obliteration be used. the olden weapons of terror for obliteration, meaning that those were, something from the weapons of the past of this civilization. Kind of like what we see people in the future will see nuclear weapons on Earth. Let the olden weapons of terror for obliteration be used. At my own son I gazed in disbelief, for brother against brother the terror weapons have been forsworn. Sounds familiar. I mean, why do we think we're in a constant state of war? I mean, that was Bramley's sort of whole premise for the gods of Eden. Well, there you go. That's all we know. That's what the people who created us, or who we call gods, who we are the victims of a gigantic science experiment of. We are. No wonder nobody's ever tried to. No wonder other extraterrestrial races haven't tried to get a hold of us, man. No, we're the bastard sons of the universe. We are. We're the redheaded stepchildren of the galaxy. And we wonder why we arm against each other, and why we have weapons, and we're all people, man. Why do we want to kill each other? Because the people of the bloodlines who are in positions of power around the globe, from presidents to congressmen to senators to royalty to the crown to all across the board, banking houses, religious institutions, all of these bloodline people are trying to become gods themselves. And to become like their gods, their creators, our creators, to become like them because they feel that because they are of the pure bloodline, that gives them the right to do it. It gives them the right to do everything that their creators did. And if that means endless war and everybody killing each other, then so be it, because that's what they did. For brother against brother, the terror weapons have been forsworn. Instead of consent, there was silence. In the silence, Enlil opened his mouth. Punishment there must be. Like birds without wings, the evildoers shall be. Marduk and Nabu of our heritage are depriving us of our heritage. Let them deprive the place of the celestial chariots. I'm sort of reading this slow and kind of, it's just, all the words are kind of reversed into what we would say it, so I'm trying to reverse them a little bit and say them, so they're easier to understand for you. Let this place be scorched to oblivion, Ninurta shouted. Let the one who scorches be me. I mean, let me do it. Let me fucking set this place on fire. Let's scorch this motherfucker to oblivion. Let's drop, but let me pull the trigger. That's what Ninurta is saying. Excited, Nergal stood up and shouted, let the evildoers' cities also be upheavaled. The sinning cities let me obliterate. Let the annihilator my name be thereafter. The earthlings by us created, the earthlings that were created by us must not be harmed. The righteous with the sinners must not be perished, I forcefully said. Ninarshag, my creating helpmate, was consenting. The matter is between the gods alone to settle. The people must not be harmed. I knew from the celestial abode to the discussions was giving much heed. I knew who determines fates from his celestial abode, his voice made heard. Let the weapons of terror be used this once. Let the place of the rocket ships be obliterated. Let the people be spared. Let Ninurta the Scorcher be. Let Nergal be the Annihilator. So did Enlil announce the decision. To them a secret of the gods I shall reveal. The hiding place of the terror weapons to them I shall disclose. The two sons, one mine, one his, to his inner chamber Enlil summoned. Nergal, as he went by me, averted his gaze to me. Alas, I cried out without words, brother has turned against brother. Are the prior times fated to repeat? A secret from the olden times to them Enlil was revealing. They had entrusted in their hands the weapons of terror. Clad with terror, with a brilliance they are unleashed, and they touch to dust and heap dust, turning everything into dust, essentially is what they're saying. For brother against brother on earth they were forsworn, and neither region to effect. Now the oath was undone like a broken jar in useless pieces. The two sons, full of glee, with quickened step from Enlil's chambers, emerged and the weapons departed. I mean, they launched the weapons. The other gods turned their back to the cities. None of his own calamity had a foreboding. Which means, they got the fuck out of there. Now, this is the account of the prior times and of the weapons of terror. Before the prior times was the beginning. After the prior times was the olden times. In the olden times, the gods came to earth and created the earthlings. In the prior time, none of the gods were on earth, and the earthlings were not yet fashioned. They were not yet made. In the prior times, the abode of the gods was on their own planet. Nibiru is its name. A great planet, reddish in radiance, around the sun, an elongated circuit Nibiru makes. It has a long orbit, allegedly. For a time in the cold is Nibiru engulfed, for part of its circuit by the sun strongly is it heated. So every time it does a rotation, it gets so close to the Earth that it heats up. But because it's got such a slow orbit, life was able to flourish there, essentially is what they're saying. A thick atmosphere envelops Nibiru by volcanic eruptions. All manner of life this atmosphere sustains, but without the atmosphere, there will only be dying, perishing. In the cold period, the inner heat of Nibiru keeps the planet warm, like a warm coat. In the hot period, it shields Nibiru from the sun's scorching rays. In the midst, I guess, in the springtime, it rains and it holds and releases to lakes and streams, giving rise. Lush vegetation our atmosphere feeds and protects. All manner of life in the waters and on land has been caused to sprout. After eons of time, our own species sprouted, and by our own essence, an eternal seed was used to procreate. Which basically says, an eternal seed was used to, I mean, something came along and created them. You know, they may be the gods that created mankind, but somebody created them too. Who was it? See, I mean, we're not even ready to ask that question as a people on this planet, are we? You know, that if there is a God or gods, most likely that God or gods has a God too, someone who created them. Well, who is that? You know, this is going to start to open up more questions than it is answers. As our numbers grew, to many regions of Nibiru, our ancestors spread. Some tilled the land, some four-legged creatures shepherded. Like, well, they had dogs, is what it means. I knew dogs were from another planet. Fucking cats, too. Bastards. I love dogs and cats, though. They're great. Fucking love them. And sometimes, man, you get a good one. You're like, man, you are not from this planet. My cat, I don't know where the fuck planet my cat's from. He ain't from here, though. I swear he's a spy from Sirius. Tries to get on computers, gets on people's computers and type shit. It's out of control. Some lived on the mountains, some in the valleys, and made their home. Some of them made their homes in the valleys, it's saying. Rivalries occurred, encroachments happened, clashes occurred, sticks became weapons. Clans gathered into tribes, and then two great nations faced each other. The nation of the north took arms against the nation of the south. And it talks about that they threw spears, which they call missiles, and they weapons of thunder and brilliance. You increase the terror. So they started out with, sticks, and then it became weapons, guns, and then missiles, and then weapons of thunder. So, it kind of sounds like the evolution of our weapons, doesn't it? First it was sticks, then it was, bows and arrows and spears and all that, and swords. Then it became, bullets and missiles and weapons of thunder, which, that's our modern day weaponry, isn't it? Weather warfare, HARP and chemtrails. So, I mean, that almost, wow, that almost sounds like there was, an evolution of weapons in the same way we've seen an evolution of weapons. A war long and fierce engulfed the planet, brother amassed against brother. There was death and destruction both north and south. For many circuits, desolation reigned the land, and all life was diminished. So for many orbits, for many rotations around the sun, there was no life on Nibiru at all. Then a truce was declared and peacemaking was conducted. Let the nations be united, the emissaries said to one another. There they are forming their world order. So this is great, isn't it? They have a war, brother against brother on the whole planet. Everybody wipes everybody out except for a few, and then the few that are left form a new world order where everybody's united. Sound familiar? I mean, that's what as above, so below means, folks. That's why they take that so seriously. As in the macrocosm, so in the microcosm. I mean, it looks like this is lining up to be our fate as well. Well, you know what? Just as it said here, is it fate or is it destiny? It was destiny for that flood to happen, but it was the fate of them to be wiped out by nuclear weapons. Well, this doesn't have to be our fate. Our fate can be determined by our actions or our inactions. But if we continue to not, do anything, if we, I mean, my goodness, like I've talked about, we got listeners in like 30-something countries now. Our listenership has just been going through the roof, but yet we have 3 or 4 or 5 out of, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of listeners that donate and support our work. Are we going to choose to do like we've always done and be lazy and assume this is somebody else's problem to handle? Or are we going to step up and change fate? Because if not, then this is what is going to be our fate. If we don't get involved and do something, this is going to be our fate. We are going to suffer the same fate that the people of old did. And something tells me the elite want it that way. That's exactly what they're planning. I want to play with the big boys. I want to play at the big boy level. We need cash to do that. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable, just the epiphanies from reading stuff on air. It just blows me away. Let there be one throne on Nibiru, one king to reign over all. There it is, the new game's in town. Divide and conquer. Kill everybody, blow everybody, create all-out warfare, and then come in and pick up the pieces and create a new order. That's what their agenda is. Let a leader from north or from south by lot be chosen. One king supreme to be. If he be from north, let south choose a female to be his spouse, an equal queen to reign alongside him. If he's from the south, if they choose one from the south, let someone from the north, a female from the north, be his spouse. Husband and wife, let them be as one flesh to become. Let their firstborn son be the successor. Let a unified dynasty thus be formed, unity on Nibiru forever to establish. They set up a fucking monarchy is what they did. They set up the new game. Who's going to run the new game? They wipe everybody out, and then they set up a new game under that. And the people 100, 200, 300 years from now have no idea why life is the way it is, and nobody really questions it, and people just going around about their business, forgetting that 200, 300, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, everybody died, and somebody came in and set up the new game that they controlled, and people just think it's day to day, and they never know what happened. You see what happened to us? The same thing. They did it here. They did it on their planet, and then they seeded us with the ability to do it again ourselves. We've gone down the same road they are. You see these, we call them vicious cycles. A father is an alcoholic and a wife beater, and so, and then the son grows up and becomes an alcoholic and a wife beater, and then his son grows up and becomes, it's a vicious cycle. But all it takes to break that vicious cycle is one person standing up and saying, no more, not me. I'm not going to be the one that continues that vicious cycle. It ends here. And that's what we have to do as a people, folks. It's our only hope. We have to say, no, we are not going to allow this to play out the way it's played out before. Every person on this planet needs to know this information. We've got to get this out to the people. People need to know that our destiny is going to be death and destruction and the setting up of a new power structure, resetting the game, resetting the table, starting it all over again. And that's exactly what they want to do because that's what their predecessors did. They're gods, the ones that tinkered on earth and created us in this whole thing. But someone can stand up to this eventually and say no more. And by God, there's never been a better time than now. It's got to be us. We have to be the ones that say, no, no, no. This vicious cycle ends here. Otherwise, it's going to continue on. And that's exactly what the elite want. And I bet they never counted on the fact we'd ever even identify it. But now that we have, it can't be held back anymore. The royal throne into one flesh combined. An unbroken line of kingship established, just like they did on earth. The first king after peace was made, a warrior of the north he was, a mighty commander. He was true and fair to the people. He was chosen because his degrees were accepted by all of the people. He built a splendid city to live in, and it was called Agade, which meant unity. So see how even the title of the city was uniting, bringing everything together, bringing together the new order. For his reign, a royal title he was granted, and it was the Celestial One. His name was On. And his name On means the Celestial One. He strong-armed people into reestablishing new laws and regulations on the land. He appointed governors for each land and created restoration and reclamation tasks for the people. Of him in the royal annals, thus it was recorded, on the lands unified, peace on Nibiru he restored. He built a new city, the canals he repaired, provided people to the food, and there was abundance in the lands. For his spouse from the south, a maiden he had chosen, for both love and warring she was known. On 2 was her royal title. Cute. On 2, T-U, like number 2. And the leader who is On spouse, the given name cleverly did mean, On 2. Yeah, it even says, it's clever. It was cute that they did that. She bore On 3 sons and no daughters. The firstborn by her named Enki. Enki. You see, like Anu, Na, Ki. Now it's just Enki. Now you're starting to see the lineage. See this? That's what this is. That's why he said, this is the preface. This is of the times that came before. Well, that's what we're reading here. This is unbelievable. This is an account. I didn't know this. I wasn't aware of this. Wow. It's mind-blowing now that I'm reading this, now that I figured out what this is. Wow, man. This is killer. This is a genealogical record of the generations of people that came before what we know as the Anunnaki. This is the record of their lineage and of their lives and of what they did. And the reason this is important to us, this is amazing. I mean, people, say a lot of crap about these, translations and stuff, blah, 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 I think a lot of that's disinfo. I think a lot of people are like, oh, no, those aren't real. Those aren't true, blah, blah. I think people are real scared of this. Because what this is doing is, and that's why it said, what has happened in the past is important to the future, because they're showing what the bloodline lineage, the relatives, ancestors of the Anunnaki who came to Earth and seeded life, they're showing what they did in their lives and how they set things up. And by having that access to that knowledge, that's why this was one of the things that Enki wanted mankind to have, this book. He wanted mankind to know this, because something in this information was going to be a gift to us to save us from some fate that may be forced upon us by these custodians in the future. So this is unbelievable, man. I mean, this, it really, it's an account of the bloodlines, of the lineage, and it talks about what they did in their times. And this is something we can learn from, especially when we see how, this man against man, brother against brother fighting. And then the new order comes in. This information and stuff we are supposed to know to learn something from it, to keep ourselves from going down the same route that people before us did. That's why this has been hidden from us. That's why they've, gone into Iraq, gone into all of the museums and taken all these things. They don't want us to get our hands on this, because if we get our hands on this stuff and understand that what happened in the past also may happen in the future, if we don't learn what happened in the past and learn from that, it's, again, just a paradigm shift. It all makes sense to me now. That's what all this shit's about, man. It was just kind of strange just reading this. And as I was reading this, I realized this is this is a genealogical account. So that somebody, somewhere, someday, you and I now, here in 2011, could gain some perspective or some knowledge from this. This is what secret societies, the original purpose of secret societies was. And what they did was they took that, corrupted it, and turned it, instead of being secret societies to teach us this, they turned it in secret societies are there to keep us from learning this. And only their people who are going to play the game their way and not tell people this are going to be initiated. This is the secret of the secret societies, ladies and gentlemen. Right here, you heard it right here on the show. I'm here to tell you right now today. This is it. This is what they've been hiding. This is what they didn't want us to know. These genealogical records of the ancestors of the people who came to earth, the gods who came to earth. This is what there's something in here, and we're going to find out because we're going to read all this on air. There is something we're supposed to learn here, whatever it is and what it all may be. Yet I just don't know, but it's something. Alone on the throne he was seated. He was supposed to choose a spouse twice, but it got postponed. Some of this stuff I'm not going to read verbatim. I'm just going to kind of give you the, kind of just put it into modern day terms. In his reign, concubines are brought into the palace. A son to him was not born. So they brought in bitches for him to bang. Essentially, they'll dumb it down for you. The dynasty thus began with the death of Enki, and there was no offspring. The middle son, though not firstborn, was pronounced the legal heir. So fascinating stuff here. And the idea of this, this being the genealogical record of the people that came before the ones that seeded the bloodlines on earth. It's fascinating stuff, because you see, now we know the answers to why mankind has lived in constant warfare. It's in our blood. And just like I talked about last night on the show, if you didn't listen to last night's show, go back and listen to it. All the shows this week, I suggest you listen to. 5 shows we got this week. I think all of them been killer. And I'm on fire right now. Even more now, But, I was just talking about last night about really, realizing that I thought for the longest time that I wasn't working hard enough, or I wasn't. And it's not just that. The only thing that's holding back me getting my work out on to a larger scale is, cash backing. Everything is, you're going to have money to get anything out there now. It's not about talent or anything else. It's about how much money you have to put behind something. But once I realized that, I realized that I don't have to kill myself to do it. Trying to kill myself to do this is not the solution. It was not a hindrance. It was not a weapon against me anymore. And that's what we have to see this as. Once we're aware of this, yes, we do have it in our blood to be in constant warfare and the rest, but we can change it. Once we're aware of it and we realize that's not the way to go, and that's a mistake, and that people who existed on other planets even prior to Earth went through this, and that people thousands of years ago were trying to get a message to us saying, hey, don't go the way we did. You got it in your blood too, because you're of us and you're like us. And since you're so much like us, you're going to go the same route we did, and a lot of people are going to die, and it's not going to be good. Here's the warning. And the elite who set up the priest class, who set up the banking houses, the religions, the power structure, the crown, the authority, the tyranny, everything, said we can't allow them to know this because we won't be able to rule if they know it. We are pushing the envelope now. I mean, can you feel it? We are in the age of awakening, folks. This is it. All is going to be revealed. It is being revealed right now on this show as you're listening. We are the generation that this stuff has to stop with. We have the information. We have the power. Our task now is to wake the people up from their slumber, and it's time to stop playing nice. I hope you'll send this broadcast to somebody. I hope you'll get it out there when it appears on YouTube, when it appears on my archives. Get it out there. Let people hear it, man. Let's do this. All right, let's get into Lost Book of Enki for you here tonight. Well, we left off Friday night. The gentleman in Dubsar who was scribing the words of Enki for this tablet had just been relieved of his duties and had been successful in scribing this book for Enki on this, esoteric tablet that sounded like some kind of computer system. Well, we talked about how, the pen was made of a crystal, like etched it into the tablet. So we're picking up where after he comes to his senses after being the scribe for Enki here. My life senses returned to me as if awakened from the deepest sleep by the sound of the calling of my name. I was in some kind of an enclosure. It was dark, but there was also an aura. Then my name was called again by the deepest of voices, and although I could hear it, I could not tell whence the voice came, nor could I see whoever it was that spoke, and I said, "Here I am." Oh, wait, I've already read this. Did we get our page thrown off here? Yeah, I did. Wow. I don't remember what page we left off on. Well, that stinks. Let me just scroll through the page. Bear with me for a minute. Oh, here we go. Yeah, because we were way past that. This is basically continuing on the sort of genealogical history of the ancestors of the Anunnaki who came to Earth and seeded life on Earth, and so this is their historical and genealogical record here. Try to see how much of this we read. It's talking essentially about how there was great cataclysms, there was nuclear weapons unleashed, and then somehow it was just interesting because after it said brother was pitted against brother, and then all of their people on their planet were wiped out. And then out of those ashes, like the phoenix out of the ashes, which is interesting because that's one of the symbols of the Brotherhood, the double-headed phoenix. Arose these bloodlines and these kings and queens and set up the new game. And so here they're talking about the circuit of Nibiru, which is the orbit of Nibiru. A destiny it is in the orbit of Nibiru embedded. So they're saying that there's, the destiny of what's to happen on their planet and our planet is hidden in the orbit of Nibiru. And many people out there believe that this comet Elenin, which is going to pass near to Earth very soon, is actually the famed Nibiru. I don't really believe that myself, but I don't not believe it either. You know what I mean? I'm just sort of, could go either way. Others of knowledge of the orbit did not consider the Nibiru's destiny to be tied with that orbit. They found that there was a breaching in their atmosphere. Volcanoes, the atmosphere were belching and spitting up. I'm sort of, as I was doing Friday night, I'm sort of kind of going over. Some of this stuff is in kind of a weird, it doesn't really translate well in modern day English. I'm kind of summarizing it all for you because it just sounds dumb to read. Volcanoes, the atmosphere forbear, less belching, were spitting up. I'd rather just say there were volcanoes and shit was coming out of them, Nibiru's air has been made thinner. The protective shit lid has been diminished. I think it's supposed to say shield, but it says shit lid. Is that what they call it in ancient Samaria? The shit lid? Yeah, get that shit lid up there, boy, before we burn to death. Ah, damn, put some duct tape and some baling wire on it. Do whatever you got to do. Keep us from burning up. I think Bill Hicks was right. We've been invaded by rednecks from another world. In the reign of Anshar and Kishar, pestilences appeared, and they could not overcome them. Their son Anshar ascended to the throne, and he was of the sixth dynasty of rule on Nibiru. His name became Master of the Shar. With great understanding, he was born. So when he was born, he was already, he already had knowledge when he was born. He was born with a great knowledge of something. With much learning, he mastered much knowledge. To remedy the afflictions in the ways he sought to remedy the afflictions of people. And he spent much time studying the orbit of Nibiru. In its looping of the sun, 5 family members embraced the planets of dazzling beauty for cures to the afflictions of their atmosphere. He examined the atmosphere. So they were finding out that people were dying on their planet, and the reason that was because of their atmosphere being depleted. To each he gave a name. Ancestral forefathers he honored as heavenly couples. He considered them. On and Onto were like twin planets. He called the first two that he encountered On and Onto. Beyond Nibiru's orbit were Anshar and Kishar, and they were the largest in size. As a messenger, Gaga among the others' course, sometimes first Nibiru meet. I think Gaga is Jupiter or Saturn or one of those. So there's your occultic reference and your occultic explanation behind Lady Gaga. Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, that's where they came from. It's all, come on. She's Italian, too. Give me a fucking break. These guys in the priest class that run the music industry and all this, they're all well aware of this stuff. In every one of her videos, Lady Gaga's videos, one of her first videos, there's Sirius in the background to the twin dogs. There's occultic stuff in every single one of those. That's not there by mistake, and it's not put there by her either. Don't confuse that. The most of the time, the guys in the A&R departments at the major record labels are the ones that are the occultists and are into this, and they suggest, hey, you should put this in there, and they say, oh, okay, cool, whatever you want, yay, give me some more coke and $1 million, I'll do whatever you want. 5 in all were Nibiru's heavenly greeters as the sun it circled. Beyond, like a boundary, the hammered bracelet of the sun encircled. As a guardian of the heavens' forbidden region with havoc, it protected. Other children of the sun, 4 in number from intrusion, the bracelet shielded. The atmospheres of the great 5 greeters Inshar set out to study. So some sort of loop, which interesting because I've just had this story here tonight and already closed out of it, damn it. Let me see if I can get back to it. That's just odd that it's talking about this bracelet that came from the sun that actually protected part of their atmosphere during the time in which it came around. And I had this story here tonight, and I didn't cover it, and I was thinking, no, I'll just skip that one. Here it is. Kind of seems synchronistic now. Maybe there's a connection to this. It says, it's from the Daily Mail, discovery of magnetic ropes that cause solar storms will help prepare Earth for space weather damage. So they discovered these ropes that precede these solar flares, which should be able to help us be able to understand when these are going to happen and protect against them. And I'll put a link to that in the chat room so you can check it out on your own, but it just seems highly coincidental and seems almost very similar to what they're describing here as this. Maybe it was something about these ropes, as they're calling here in this Daily Mail article. Maybe that's what the bracelet was, shielding the planet. In its repeating orbit, the 5 in Nibiru's loop carefully were examined. The 5 planets in the same orbit as Nibiru were carefully examined. They observed what types of atmospheres that these planets possessed. And with celestial chariots, they intensely were examined. Oh, right. So they sent spaceships to examine the planets closer. That's what it is, celestial chariots. Come on. The findings were astounding. The discoveries confusing. From orbit to orbit, Nibiru's atmosphere seemed to have more breaching. In the councils of the learned, cures were avidly debated. Ways to bandage the wound were urgently considered. A new shield to embrace the planet was attempted. All that was thrust up back to the ground came down. And the councils of the learned, the belching volcanoes were studied. The atmosphere by belching volcanoes that were created by the volcanoes. God, I'm just trying to figure out a way to say this. The atmosphere by belching volcanoes had been created as wound by their diminished belching had come to be. And it just doesn't, So these volcanoes cause their atmosphere, or one of the causes of their atmosphere to be depleted. And it says here that they basically figured out how to make a new invention that would utilize the volcanoes to basically solve their problem. And so they were actually trying to get the volcanoes to keep spewing, even though they wanted them to stop before. Now they were hoping that the volcanoes would start to spew again because whatever solution they come up with needed that to happen in order for it to work. In the reign of Inshar, the breach in the skies grew bigger. It didn't rain. The wind blew harder. And there was no water that came out of the ground. On the lands, there was an accusation the breasts of mothers were dry. In the palace, there was distress, and an accusation therein took hold, as first his wife, Inshar, a half-sister, did espouse by the law of the seed abiding. Ninshar, she was called, who bears the shars of the lady, a son she did not bear. By a concubine to Inshar, a son was born. The firstborn son he was. By Ninshar, first wife and half-sister, a son was not brought forth. By the law of succession, the concubine's son to the throne ascended. The 7th to reign he was. Du-Uro was his royal name, and the dwelling place fashioned its meaning. In the house of concubines, not in the palace, he was indeed conceived. So he was like, he was like the George Bush of his time, I suppose. The bastard son who ascended to power, the more like the Bill Clinton of his time, huh? Yeah. I don't know if they still know who Bill Clinton's dad was. His mom was a dirty, dirty whore. Damn, man. She fucked so many dudes. They didn't know who the fuck Bill's dad was. I think somebody said it was, that guy from Hee Haw. Junior Samples or some shit like that. I think somebody said Junior Samples was his dad. And somebody at Dilly Plaza told me that one time. As his spouse, a maiden from his youth beloved Duru chose. And, that's interesting. So, Duru, the bastard son who took over power, chose his wife because he loved her, not because she was in the bloodline. Uh-oh. Well, this is interesting, man. This story's starting to get thick. Now we're starting to see why, we need to learn this. This sounds very similar to the history of some of our kings and queens and power structure on earth, doesn't it? Da Uru was her royal name. She who is by my side was the meaning. Wow, that's kind of a downgrade from, the wife before. What she was like, the one who does something in the sky. This is like, the bitch who stands by my side all the time. Wow, that's just beautiful, man. Wonderful, wonderful poetry there. In the royal court, confusion was rampant. Sons were not heirs. Wives were not half-sisters. In the land, the suffering was increasing. Fields had no abundance. The plants wouldn't grow. And among the people, fertility was diminished. I mean, nobody was getting pregnant, means nobody was being born, so their population was diminishing fast. In the palace, fertility was absent. Neither son nor daughter was brought forth. Of On's seed, 7 were the rulers. Then of his seed, the throne was dry. So On, which is funny because On is, if if you study the genealogical history of the Anunnaki, On was, the Anunnaki were the Anunnaki were the princes of, the one God. Princes of the guy who he was the son, the forefathers, they were the forefathers of the one who was the first person that started the bloodline, and that was On. And so after 7 of On's bloodlines were the rulers, they no longer had one of On's bloodline in rule. Daru, a child at the palace gateway, was embraced as a son. Duru, in the end, was adopted. His name became Lama, meaning dryness. In the palace, the princes were very mad, and they were complaining to the council of counselors. In the end, Lama ascended the throne. Though not of On's seed, he was the 8th to reign. Now, it's very interesting. He sounds very much like a Akhenaten type character, In the councils of the learned to heal the breach, there were 2 suggestions. One was to use a metal to fix their atmosphere, a metal by the name of gold. On Nibiru, it was greatly rare. Within the hammered bracelet, it was abundant. So the zone, I guess, the hammered bracelet may be very well talking about the asteroid belt. It was the only substance that to the finest powder could be ground up and put in high into the heaven, into the atmosphere, and would stay suspended. Thus, with replenishments, the breach would heal and it would have better protection. Let the celestial boats be built. Let a celestial fleet fleet the gold to Nibiru bring over. So here they are. They're talking about let's create ships and go somewhere out, on the other side of our solar system and find some gold and bring it back here. Funny, that would just be the one thing our monetary system just happened to be based on, huh? Get us all to mine it. Get us all to build our whole, fight and kill each other for 3,500 years or 3,600 years or however long it is, and then create this power structure, then get everybody to hoard it in one spot. And then when the Anunnaki come back and tell us,
pathetic earthlings, bow down to me. We are the Anunnaki and we have returned for our gold. We will take it back to our planet and leave you pathetic earthlings here on the planet to die.
Stranger things have happened. Probably what it's going to be, isn't it? Folks, you're going to have to get this gold right now, folks, because Anunnaki want to take the gold away from you, folks. Ted's got a great deal on Jugo for you today, and you need to get it now, because you don't have much time left, folks. The Anunnaki are going to take your gold, folks, and I'm fucking mad about it. Yeah, you'll probably hear that before it's over with. Let weapons of terror be created. Now, we've established from reading William Bramley and reading the rest of this that the weapons of terror they refer to are the nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction. So they're saying they should, go to this planet or wherever it is and just launch nuclear weapons and blow the shit out of stuff and go in and pick up all the gold. For a decision, Lama was too feeble. What did he know about making that kind of a choice? One orbit of Nibiru was completed. In the fields, affliction was not diminished. The volcanoes continued belching, and the atmosphere was still not repaired. A third shar passed. A shar is a year in Nibiru. By the way, it's a marking of a year, or marking of a sort of passage of time. So when they say a third shar passed and a fourth shar passed, that's a notation of time. By the way, still the gold was not obtained. In the land, there was still strife. Strife was abundant. There was no food, no water. Everybody in the lands were disjointed. Everybody was accusing each other. Everybody's running around basically like a chicken with their head cut off, not knowing who to blame, playing the blame game. And there's basically saying, well, then if this is our destiny to die like this, then we can't really do anything about it. In the royal court, the princes were astir. The king's accusations were directed foolishly, unreasoning, and greater calamities instead of a cure he brought forth. From the olden storehouses, weapons were retrieved. A rebellion, there was much speaking. A prince in the royal palace was the first to take up arms. And now they're having civil unrest. And they went up to Lama and attacked him. And they killed Lama, the eighth ruler. Lama is no more. The king is no more, with glee he announced. To the throne room, Alalu rushed. On the throne, he himself seated. Without right or counsel, a king, he pronounced himself king. In the land, all unity was lost. Some rejoiced the death of Lama. Some were saddened by it. Now this is the account of the kingship of Alalu and of the going to earth. So when this guy, what's essentially what they're telling us is that this guy Lama died, and this guy Alalu, who just, wasn't anybody, basically came in and said, I'm not of the bloodline. I'm just a regular person. I'm taking over. And now that I'm taking over and I'm the new game in town, I'm saying that we're going to Earth and we're going to go get the gold there. So there was no talk of going to Earth and mining Earth. That's interesting. By the power structure of people that existed on the throne in Nibiru, there was no talk of even going to Earth to do this until this usurper came in and basically took over the throne by, sheer brute force. He came in, killed the king, took over and became king. And said, we're going to Earth to get the gold to fix this problem. That's very interesting. This is why they say that the Anunnaki, the people that came to Earth and did the things that they did and created humans and all this stuff, were pursued from some of the other inhabitants of Nibiru. They were pursued by other Anunnaki. So that kind of clears that up a little bit, doesn't it? So it wasn't that we were even, invaded or genetically manipulated by people who were, of the royal bloodline. These were basically usurpers. We were. That's kind of an unbelievable thing. In the land, the unity was lost, and many people did not like the kingship of this guy Alalu just coming in and saying, "I'm taking over. I'm the new game in town." You can imagine that. Princes were agitated. The counselors were distraught. From father to son, succession from on to the throne continued. Even Lama the eighth, by adoption, a son was proclaimed. Who was Alalu? Was he a legal heir? Was he a firstborn? By what right did he usurp? Was he not a king slayer? Before the seven who judge Alalu was summoned, his fate to consider. So they bring into him to be judged by seven people. Though through neither legal heir nor son of a firstborn royal seed, he was he. Of Engshargal I am descended before the judges, he claimed, by a concubine. My ancestor was born to him. Elam was his name. By the count of shars, by the count of years, Elam was the firstborn throne to belong to him. So basically, he came in and said, no, I can prove that I am part of this bloodline. So they couldn't really argue with that. The royal annals from the House of Records were brought forth. With much care they were read. On and onto the first royal couple, there were 3 sons and no daughters born to them. The firstborn was Enki. He died on the throne and had no offspring. The middle son in his stead was Anib, and Shargal was his firstborn, and to the throne he ascended after him. On the throne of kingship by the firstborn did not continue, so it didn't continue on that far, and this goes on and on and on. They're talking about blah, blah. Is he, they're trying to figure out, does he have the right to be king? Is he a usurper, this, that, and the other? Secession must be reconsidered to the assembly, he said. Through neither firstborn nor by the queen of a son of pure seed am I descended. The essence of On in me is preserved, by no concubine diluted. So he's saying, basically, yes, she had, On had, my father had sex with, a person who wasn't of the bloodline, but it didn't dilute it. I'm still part of he's trying to just convince these people that he is one of them through the bloodline so that he can, maintain power. They asked for his name. It is Anu. After my forefather, I named. Now, what's interesting about that? Wow. So this is the story of Anu. So the guy who took over and usurped the throne was Anu, and we know that Anu's sons later on were Enlil and Enki. So Enlil and Enki, who allegedly caused all this havoc on Earth, the flood and genetic manipulation and all this stuff, and seeding mankind with these phony religions, were the result of someone who may or may not have actually been a part of the royal bloodline. So if that's true, and these people that are in charge and power today, and presidents, kings, queens, power structure all over the world, that are part of this bloodline, and they're basing their whole divine right to rule on the fact that they're a part of these bloodlines, right? If that's true, then that would make them imposters. That would make them these, because from what this genealogical and historical record of the ancestors of the Anunnaki tells us, is that it wasn't the people who had been in the bloodlines and the power structure and everything up to that point who made the decision to Earth. They seemed to act like that was taboo. Then this guy comes in, kills the king, takes over, and then goes through this big, long, drawn-out ordeal of being in front of the council and show, oh, look at me, and and I came from this bloodline, and my baby daddy was over here, and he fucked this whore, the concubine, and just because she's a whore doesn't mean I'm not a part of the bloodline. All this convincing going on, you see. So again, that would make this very, very interesting. That would prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that these people that, maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe that's why they've been creating space-based weapons. Maybe, they're scared, because if there's something to this, if this is real, then that would mean that at some point the real bloodlines of power, if any of these people still exist anywhere, could actually feasibly come back and call out the power structure here on Earth as being the usurpers and the descendants of the usurper who took over the throne on Nibiru. They could very well come here and say, you know, we need help fixing our atmosphere, but, you know, they came down here and set this up and basically did it against our wishes. Boy, that could be, no wonder they don't want us knowing what this information is. My goodness, see, it just becomes more clear every time we read it. They asked him what his name was, and he said, my name is Anu, after my forefather I am named. They inquired about his generations. Of On's 3 sons, he reminded them. Enki was the firstborn. Without a son or daughter, he died. And Neb was the middle son. Instead of Enki, to the throne he descended. And Neb, the daughter of his younger brother, took to be wife. From them onward to the succession in the annals was recorded. Who was that younger brother? A son of On and Ontu, that was of purest seed. The counselors looked with wonderment at each other. Inuru was his name. Anu to them announced that he was my great ancestor. His spouse, Ninuru, was a half-sister. Her son was firstborn. Inama was his name. And from the throneship we were removed. From On's pure seed we were not removed. So they basically at some point took out someone who had the right to be in power and tried to say that they weren't a part of the bloodline when they were. Okay. Though by different offsprings of one ancestor we were both descended, let us live in peace together and return abundance to Nibiru. Let me keep the throne. Let you keep the succession. Meaning, you know, all right, well, let's do it like this. You let me stay in charge and have power and get some stuff done. And when I'm done and I'm old and I die, I'll pass it on to you, and then your bloodline can keep it going after that. Nice little compromise to keep everybody happy, huh? To the council words he directed, let Anu, the crown prince, be. Let him be my successor. Let his son, my daughter, espouse. Let succession be united. Anu bowed before the council, and to the assembly he declared, Alalu's cupbearer I shall be. His successor in waiting, a son of mine, a daughter of his as bride, I shall choose. That was the council's decision, and in the royal annals it was inscribed. In this manner, Alalu on the throne remained seated. He summoned the sages, the savants, and the commanders for him to consult in deciding that, and from that he gained much knowledge. Let celestial boats be constructed to seek the gold in the hammered bracelet, he decided. So again, he usurps the crown, takes over, convinces them, hey, you know, you let me get in here and get some stuff done, and then I'll make sure when I'm done that, you know, we'll still continue the bloodline thing and pass down the power. And so what is the first thing he decides to do? Let's build the celestial boats. Let's build the crafts. Let's go to the hammered bracelet, the area around the earth, and let's get the gold and bring it back here and fix our atmosphere. And their first try was essentially no good. By the hammered bracelets, the boats were crushed. None of them returned. Let the weapons of terror enter the bowels of Nibiru. Let Nibiru be cut open. Let the volcanoes again erupt, he then commanded. So this asshole tries to, you know, build these ships to go and get the gold. It fails. They are destroyed, and then he gets pissed off and unleashes, you know, weather weapons and says, let the volcanoes erupt, unleashes nuclear weapons. With weapons of terror, skyborne chariots were armed with terror missiles from the skies where the volcano struck. Oh! So he sent up the ships and launched nuclear weapons inside of the volcanoes of Nibiru. The mountains swayed, the valleys shuddered as great brilliances with thunder exploded. In the land there was much rejoicing. Everybody was expecting there was going to be an abundance of food and things were going to get better. And it just continued to get worse. The volcanoes did not increase. The atmosphere did not heal. And it kept going around its orbit, and it kept getting colder and colder on Nibiru. Wow, so it's getting very interesting. So we're going to leave it there, and we'll pick up tomorrow and read more of this. You know, it is kind of a tough read. Somebody pointed that out, one of our listeners. But, you know, I've done that before. I've started books, and I've said, this is a tough read. I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do that with this. I'm going to see this one through. And the reason is because I think there's enough here to gain from reading this, you know, and I don't mind going through and kind of giving you the, you know, rough translation of what this stuff is saying. But, man, it's just ultimately fascinating. Again, you know, the past is prologue. This, you know, he who ignores the past is someone who is not going to know what's going to happen in the future. And this was recorded for us so that we wouldn't make the same mistakes that they made. And unfortunately, you know, well, trying to figure out how to repair your atmosphere and stuff like that sounds like we're pretty much already there, doesn't it? But we'll continue more with this next. Chapter 40, or page 43, where we left off last night in the Lost Book of Enki. Of rocks and boulders was it together hammered, like orphans with no mother they banded together, surging back and forth a bygone destiny they followed. Their doings were loathsome, troubling their ways. Nibiru's probing chariots like preying lions they devoured. So something basically, you know, devoured these spaceships. The precious gold needed for surviving, they refused to dislodge. The chariot of Alalu toward the hammered bracelet was headlong moving. The ferocious builders in close combat to boldly face. So there was definitely a fight going on here. Alalu, the firestones in his chariot more strongly stirred up. That which shows the way, with steady hands he directed. The ominous boulders against the chariot charged forward like an enemy in battle attacking. Toward them, Alalu shot a death-dealing missile from his spaceship. That's literally what it says. It says, towards them, Alalu, a death-dealing missile from the chariot let loose. So he shot a missile out of a spaceship. Then another and another against the enemy. The terror weapons he thrust. So he's shooting nukes. This is great. You know, how come nobody's made a sci-fi movie out of this shit yet? Somebody will now that I've said it. Make billions of dollars, and I wish I would have done it. That always happens to me. As frightened warriors, the boulders turned back, a path for Alalu granting. Like by a spell, the hammered bracelet, a doorway to the king, it opened. That sounds like a Stargate. So a Stargate opened. In the dark deepness, Alalu, the heavens, he could clearly see. By the bracelet's ferocity, he was not defeated. His mission was not ended. In the distance, the sun's fiery ball was sending forth its brilliance. Welcoming rays towards Alalu, it was emitting. Before it was a red-brown planet on its orbit. The sixth in count of celestial gods it was. Alalu could but glimpse it. On its destined course from Alalu's path, it was quickly moving. Then snow-hued earth appeared. The seventh in the celestial count. So he's getting, you know, he blows up and blows this stuff out of the way, the people that are chasing him. And then, so they're chasing him from Nibiru. He shoots these nuclear weapons, blows them up, and starts making his way towards Earth, presumably to come down and seed us with culture and information and religion and to call himself a god and everything else. Toward the planet, Alalu set his course to a destination most inviting. Smaller than Nibiru was its alluring ball. Weaker than Nibiru was its attracting net, its gravity. Its atmosphere it was thinner than Nibiru's, and its clouds were within it swirling. Below, the earth to 3 regions was divided, snow white at the top and on the bottom, blue and brown in between. Deftly, Alalu spread the chariot's arresting wings around the earth's ball to circle. Again, let's keep in mind this stuff came out of Sumerian clay tablets. You think these people could have just made up perfect descriptions of the earth? It just boggles my mind to people that say that this is hogwash or whatever. I mean, that's 5,000-year-old text. How can you explain that? In the middle region, dry lands and watery oceans he could discern. The beam that penetrates downward he directed, Earth's innards to detect. I have attained it, he ecstatically shouted. So right there he tells you he had a beam that he could shoot down to Earth and determine how much gold was there. That's high technology. I have attained it, ecstatically, he shouted. Gold, much gold. The beam has indicated it was beneath the dark-hued region. In the waters it was, too. With pounding heart, Alalu's a decision was contemplating. Shall he, on the dry land, his chariot bring down, penchance to crash and die? Perchance to crash and die. So, will he land on land, or shall he land on the water and risk sinking? Which way shall he survive? Will he the treasured gold discover? In the eagle's seat, Alalu was not stirring. To fate's hands, the chariot he entrusted. Fully caught in Earth's attracting net, the chariot was moving faster. Its spread wings became aglow. Its spread wings became aglow. Was this motherfucker landing in a Klingon bird of prey or something? Jesus Christ. Is that where the fuck they got that at, too? Wouldn't surprise me. Von Braun's Nazis were in on the science advisory board on the original Star Trek series. Fact. It spread its wings. Its spread wings became aglow. He's landing in a bird ship. A fucking Klingon bird of prey. Jesus Christ, the Anunnaki are Klingons. Great. No wonder they're dumbasses. Klingons are fucking dumb. Earth's atmosphere was like an oven. Well, yeah, you come in through the atmosphere, you start heating up, motherfucker. Guess you weren't smart enough to know that in advance, were you? I guess you didn't have a nifty little laser beam you could shoot down here to figure that out, now did you? Then the chariot shook, emitting a mortifying thunder. With abruptness, the chariot crashed, and with a suddenness altogether stopping. Senseless from the shaking and stunned by the crash, Alalu wasn't moving. Then he opened his eyes and knew he was among the living. At the planet of gold, he victoriously arrived. Now, this is the account of the earth and its gold. It is an account of the beginning and how the celestial gods were created. In the beginning, when in the above, the gods in the heavens had not been called into being. And in the below, Ki, the firm ground, had not yet been named. Alone in the void there existed Apsu, the primordial begetter. In the heights of the above, the celestial gods had not yet been created. So, see, that's exactly. Celestial gods, the ones that were the hierarchy that was the bloodlines on Nibiru that we talked about earlier, that had that genealogical record. Those are the ones that became the gods. Above and below, the gods had not yet been formed. Destinies were not yet decreed. No reed had yet been formed. No marshland had appeared. Alone did Apsu reign in the void. Then by his winds the primordial waters were mingled. A divine and artful spell Apsu upon the waters cast. On the void's deep he poured a sound sleep. Tiamat, the mother of all, as a spouse for himself he fashioned. A celestial mother, a watery beauty he was indeed. A watery beauty she was indeed. Now, Tiamat is said to be the mother of all, which is supposed to be this other planet that was once in our solar system that was a water planet that looked like a second sun from Earth because of the way the sun reflected off the water on the planet. Beside him, Apsu, little Mumu, then brought forth, as his messenger he him appointed, a gift for Tiamat to present. A gift resplendent to his spouse Apsu granted, a shining metal, the everlasting gold for her alone to possess. Then it was that the two, their waters mingled, their waters mingled, yeah. You know what it says when their waters mingled, right? And like Jesus turning the water into wine. And how Jesus turned the water into wine, he shot a fat load right in some girl's mouth. Divine children, yeah, really. That's what the water was. The magic water he told them to drink for. Yeah, man, it was semen. A bunch of semen worshipers. Male and female were the celestials created, Lamu and Lahamu by the names they were called. In the below did Apsu and Tiamat make them an abode. Before then, they had grown in age and in stature, and the waters above Anshar and Kishar were formed. Surpassing their brothers in size they were. As a celestial couple, the two were fashioned. So hear what they're saying here. They're talking about forming these celestial. They're talking about. He's talking about forming moons and forming things like of that nature and planets. In order for life to be able to flourish on Earth, because if we didn't have a moon, we wouldn't, we wouldn't have any sort of tides or any ability for life to be created. A son, On, in the distant heavens was their heir. Then Antu to be his spouse, and as On's equal was brought forth, as a boundary of the upper waters, their abode was made. Thus were three heavenly couples, below and above in the depths, created by names that were called the family of Apsu. With Mumu and Tiamat they formed. At that time, Nibiru had not yet been seen. The earth was not yet called into being. Mingled were the heavenly waters by a hammered bracelet. They were not yet separated. At that time, circuits were not yet fully fashioned. Oh, so okay. Well, that's interesting. That tells you right there. They're talking about forming planetary systems. I've talked about this and speculated about this for a long time. That I believe that at some point during one of these cataclysms, the Earth was re-terraformed. I think that's what these guys have been doing. They've been going around terraforming planets forever. And that's kind of what it's talking about here. I mean, that is what it's talking about here. I mean, it says at that time the circuits were not yet fully fashioned. Well, the circuits, we know, they're referring to orbits. So that's an admission that they had the technology to be able to create orbits for particular planets. I mean, that's insane. Their celestial kinfolk banded together. Erratic were their ways. Their ways to Apsu were very loathsome. Tiamat, getting no rest, was aggravated and raged. A throng to march by her side she formed. A growing, raging host against the sons of Apsu she brought forth. With 11 of this kind she brought forth. She made the firstborn Kingu, chief among them. When the celestial gods of this herd did hear, for counsel they rallied. Kingu she has elevated to rank as on command to him she gave. A tablet of destiny to his chest she has attached, his own orbit to acquire. To battle against the gods of her offspring, Kingu she instructed. Who will stand up to Tiamat? The gods asked each other. Now this is crazy, because this is turning into this like sort of mythological story of these planets, in our solar system battling each other. That's just bizarre. So who shall stand up to Tiamat? So let me guess. Somebody's going to defeat Tiamat. And then when they defeat Tiamat, that's what's going to cause the asteroid belt to form. It's going to cause all the water to rush to Earth. And then that's what they're going to refer to in the book of Genesis as the waters above the firmament, right? Let me guess. Watch, whatever happens, Tiamat's going to be defeated. And that's what that's symbolic of. None in their orbit stepped forward. None a weapon for battle would bear. At that time, in the heart of the deep, a god was engendered. In a chamber of fates, a place of destinies, he was born. By an artful creator was he fashioned. The son of his own son he was. From the deep where he was engendered, the god from his family in a rushing departed. A gift to his creator, the seed of life, he carried with him. To the void he set his course, a new destiny he was seeking. The first to glimpse the wandering celestial was the ever-watchful Antu. Alluring with his figure a radiance, he was beaming. Lordly was his gait, G-A-I-T, gait. Exceedingly great was his course. Of all the gods, he was the loftiest, surpassing their orbit he was. The first to glimpse him was Antu. Her breast by child never sucked. Her breast by child never sucked. I bet there's an anagram in there, Alice. Come be my son, she called to him. Let me your mother become. She cast her net and made him welcome, and made his course for the purpose suited. Oh, whoa, nice orbit, pulling in something in the orbit there. Her words filled the newcomer's heart with pride. The one who would nurse him made him haughty. His head to double size grew larger. 4 members at his side he sprouted, and his lips, he moved his lips in acceptance. A godly fire from them blazed forth. See, this is talking about, probably Jupiter forming. Toward Antu his course he turned, his face to An soon to show. When An saw him, my son, with exultation he shouted. To leadership you shall be consigned. A host by your side will be your servants. Let Nibiru be your name, as crossing forever known. He bowed to Nibiru, turning his face at Nibiru's passage. He spread his net for Nibiru. 4 servants he brought forth. So this is saying that the gods themselves are the planets, and the planets themselves are the gods. As in, they are conscious, and in each of the planets are actually living entities that are conscious. That would have unbelievable implications for our planet and all planets, wouldn't it? But that's what they're saying here. His host by his side to be the south wind, the north wind, the fast wind, and the west wind. With joyful heart on to Anshar, his forebearer, the arrival of Nibiru announced. Anshar, upon hearing this, Gaga, who was by his side as an emissary, sent forth words of wisdom to On to deliver, to task Nibiru to assign. He charged Gaga, which I believe is Venus, to give voice to what was in his heart. To On thus say, Tiamat, she who bore us now detests us. She has set up a warring host. She is furious with rage. Against the gods, her children, 11 warriors, march by her side. Kingu, among them, she elevated. A destiny to his chest she attached without right. No god among us against her venom can stand up. Her host in all of us has established fear. Let Nibiru become our avenger. Let him vanquish Tiamat. Let him save our lives. For him to decree a fate, let him go forth and face our mighty foe. To On, Gaga departed. He bowed before him. The words of Anshar, he repeated. On to Nibiru's forebearers, words repeated. Gaga's message to him he revealed. To the words, Nibiru with wonder listened. Of the mother who would her children devour, with fascination he heard. His heart, without saying, to set out against Tiamat, he had already prompted. He opened his mouth to On, and Gaga said, if indeed I am to vanquish Tiamat, to save your lives, then convene the gods to assembly and proclaim my destiny to be supreme. Let all the gods agree in council to make me the leader and bow to my command. When Lamu and Lahamu heard this, they cried out with anguish. Strange was the demand, its meaning cannot be fathomed. Thus they said, the gods who decree the fates with each other consulted. To make Nibiru their avenger, they all agreed. To him an exalted fate decreed. From this day on, unchallengeable shall be your commandments. To him they said, no one among us gods shall transgress your bounds. And we're about to pick up, it's about to get into the celestial battle. So I'm going to read this little bit and stop before it gets to the celestial battle. Go, Nibiru, be our avenger. They fashioned for him a princely circuit towards Tiamat, a orbit. They gave Nibiru blessings. They gave Nibiru awesome weapons. Anshar, 3 more winds of Nibiru brought forth, the evil wind, the whirlwind, and the matchless wind. Kishar, with a blazing flame, filled his body, a net to enfold Tiamat there within. Thus, ready for battle, Nibiru toward Tiamat directly set his course. So this is talking about this, the battle of the gods and the gods being planets and what led to that. So we know, as we already know, that Tiamat is going to be destroyed. That becomes the asteroid belt. The water comes rushing down to Earth, covering much of the land on Earth with water. It was already covered with a great deal of water, but that's where the rest of it came in. And that would lead us to the next timeline of them starting to use genetic manipulation and start to use mankind as a slave race. This is fascinating stuff. It's one thing to, already have an idea of this stuff being there, but man, oh man, it's totally different when you really start to look at it in this way. And I'm glad we're reading this, and I'm glad we're starting to get some information on some of these, anagrams. Now, this is the account of the celestial battle. We had the lead up to that last night, so tonight we're going to actually have the battle. And how the earth came to be, and of Nibiru's destiny. The Lord went forth, his fated course he followed. Toward the raging Tiamat, he set his face, a spell with his lips he uttered. So this is interesting that these people, they seem to be, these gods are using spells and they're using magic. And Tiamat, of course, we know this is the battle of the planets, the account of the celestial battle, meaning the battle of the planets. And Enki talks about these planets being gods, which is funny. Yeah, somebody was talking about that email we got from some crack nut a few months ago saying, all the planets are Satan. Oh, my God.
Suck Satan's cock, bitch.
Oh, my goodness. And so, again, this is, bear in mind when we're talking about here in this segment that this is supposedly a planetary battle between gods, the planets themselves being gods and battling. And, of course, we know what the outcome that's going to be, the destruction of Tiamat, which was allegedly this water planet that, when viewed from Earth, made it appear from Earth that there were two suns because it was a water planet and the sun shining on it made it reflect, so it looked like a second sun. And supposedly it was blown up. The pieces of it became the asteroid belt, and all the water came rushing down to Earth, causing the Great Deluge. And so this is essentially what this is going to be talking about right here. Toward the raging Tiamat, he had set his face, a spell with his lips he uttered. As a cloak for protection, he, the pulsar, and the emitter put on. Pulsar and emitter, so that's like, this sounds like high technology, doesn't it? I mean, again, you have to understand that this is talking about very, very advanced technology, advanced beyond what we even have right now in 2011, way, way beyond that. With a fearsome radiance, his head was crowned. On his right, he posted the smiter. On his left, the repeller he placed. These, some sort of laser weapons, it sounds like. This is just insane. The seven winds, his host of helpers, like a storm he sent forth. Toward the raging Tiamat he was rushing, clamoring for battle. The gods thronged about him. Then from his path they departed. To scan Tiamat and her helpers alone he was advancing. The scheme of Kingu, her host commander, to conceive. When he saw vigilant Kingu, his vision became blurred. As he gazed upon in the direction of the monsters, he was distracted, and he got off course, and he was confused. Tiamat's band tightly encircled her. With terror they trembled. Tiamat gave a shudder to her roots, and a mighty roar she emitted. On Nibiru, she cast a spell and engulfed him with her charms. The issue between them was joined. The battle was unavoided. Face to face they came, Tiamat and Nibiru against each other. They were advancing. They approached for battle, and they pressed on for single combat, meaning one-on-one, man-on-man. The Lord spread his net to encompass her. He cast it. With fury, Tiamat cried out like one possessed. She lost her senses. The evil wind which had been behind him, Nibiru drove forward. In her face, he let it loose. I'm not trying to be sexually dirty or be vulgar here, but I mean, you know what that kind of, you know what that sounds like, right? He drove forward and let it loose in her face. I mean, you know, I don't think it's very hard to figure that out. I mean, you know, he shot a load. I mean, I don't know what else to say. She opened her mouth, the evil wind to swallow, but could not close her lips. Oh, I'm sorry. The evil wind charged her belly into her innards. It made its way. Yeah, I mean, this is totally what this is meaning. Okay, wow. So this is the ejaculation of the gods into the mouths of the gods. This is dirty, man. This is triple X. The FCC would have a major problem with this if this was on terrestrial radio. Nibiru drew forward.
Nibiru drove forward. In her face, he let it loose. She opened her mouth, the evil wind to swallow, but could not close her lips. The evil wind charged her belly. Into her innards it made its way. Her innards were howling. Her body was distended. Her mouth was wide open. Through the opening, Nibiru shot a brilliant arrow, a lightning most divine. It pierced her innards. Her belly it tore apart. It tore into her womb and it split apart her heart. Oh, this is good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Satan likes to come in every now and again. Having thus subdued her, her life breath he extinguished. The lifeless body surveyed, like a slaughtered carcass Tiamat now was. Beside their lifeless mistress, her 11 helpers trembled with terror. In Nibiru's net they were captured, unable to flee. Kingu, who by Tiamat was made the host chief, was among them. The Lord put him into fetters. To his lifeless mistress he bound him. He wrestled from Kingu the tablets of destinies unright. Well, that would mean that he made Tiamat be in orbit. It didn't get destroyed. That's all. That's kind of odd. Stamped it with his own seal and fastened the destiny to his own chest. The others of Tiamat's band, as captives he bound in his orbit, he ensnared them. So he's making them his planets by ensnaring them in his orbit. He trampled them underfoot and cut them up into pieces. He bound them all to his orbit. To turn around them, he made and to rotate backwards in course. So he made them have a reverse orbit. From the battle of Nibiru, then departed. To the gods who had appointed the victory to announce, he made a orbit around Apsu. To Kishar and Anshar, he journeyed ahead. Gaga came out to greet him as a herald to the others he journeyed. Beyond An and Antu, Nibiru to the abode in the deep he proceeded. The fate of lifeless Tiamat and of Kingu he then considered. To Tiamat, whom he had subdued, the Lord Nibiru then returned. He made his way to her, paused to view her lifeless body, and to artfully divide the monster in his heart that was planning something. Then, as a muscle into two parts, he split her. Her chest from her lower parts he separated. Her inner channels he cut apart. Her golden veins he beheld with wonder. Trotting upon her hinder part, the Lord, her uppermost part completely severed. The north wind, his helper from his side, he summoned. To thrust away the severed head, the wind he commanded to the void, in the void to place it. Nibiru wind upon Tiamat, then hovered, sweeping upon her gushing waters. Nibiru shot a lightning. To north wind he gave a signal. In a brilliance was Tiamat's upper part to a region unknown carried. With her then bound, Kingu was also exiled. Of the severed part, a companion to be, the hinder part fate Nibiru then considered. As an everlasting trophy of the battle he wished it to be, a constant reminder in the heavens, the place of the battle to enshrine. With his mace, the hinder part, he smashed to bits and pieces, then strung them together as a band to form a hammered bracelet. So is that Saturn? locking them together as a watchman. No, that's the asteroid belt. The hammered bracelet is the asteroid belt. Locking them together as a watchman, he stationed them, a firmament to divide the waters from the waters. Yeah, waters above the firmament. That's what they're talking about in the book of Genesis. The destruction of Tiamat. The upper waters above the firmament from the waters below it he separated. Artful works Nibiru thus fashioned. The Lord then crossed the heavens to survey the regions. From Apsu's quarter to the abode of Gaga, he measured the dimensions. The edge of the deep Nibiru then examined towards his birthplace, he cast his gaze. He paused and hesitated then to the firmament, the place of the battle. Slowly he returned. Passing again to Apsu's region of the sun, missing his spouse that he thought about with remorse. He missed her because she was dead. He gazed upon Tiamat's wounded half. To her upper part he gave attention. The waters of life, her bounty from the wounds, were still pouring. Her golden veins, Apsu's rays were reflecting. The seed of life, his creator's legacy, Nibiru then remembered. When he trod on Tiamat, when he split her asunder, to her the seed he surely imparted. He addressed words to Apsu, to him saying, with your warming rays to the wounds give healing. Let the broken part new life be given, in your family as a daughter to be. Let the waters to one place be gathered. Let firm land appear. This is when they're transferring the water to earth, folks. That's what this is. By firm land, let her be called Ki. Henceforth, her name to be. And Ki, before it was named earth, was called Ki, K-I. Apsu to the words of Nibiru gave heed. Let the earth join my family. Ki, firm land of the below. Let earth her name be henceforth. By her turning, let there be day and night. In the days, my healing rays to her I shall provide. Let Kingu be a creature of the night to shine at night. I shall appoint him. So Kingu became the moon. Earth's companion, the moon forever to be. Which is just odd considering, our moon seems to be an artificial construct. I mean, it seems, it orbits us in a geosynchronous pattern like a satellite, not like an orbit of a moon. That's what's very odd about it. Nibiru, the words of Apsu with satisfaction heard. He crossed the heavens and surveyed the regions. To the gods whom had elevated him, he granted permanent stations. Their circuits he destined that none shall transgress nor fall short of each other. He strengthened the heavenly locks, gates on both sides he established. An outermost abode he chose for himself beyond Gaga were its dimensions. The great circuit or the great orbit to be his destiny, he beseeched Apsu for him to decree. All of the gods spoke up from their stations. Let Nibiru's sovereignty be surpassing. Most radiant of the gods he is. Let him truly the son of the sun be. From his quarter, Apsu gave his blessing. Nibiru shall hold the crossing of heaven and earth. Crossing shall be his name. The gods shall cross over neither above nor below. He shall hold the central position. The shepherd of the gods he shall be. A shar, or a type of a way of measuring time. A shar shall be his orbit, that his destiny will forever be. Now, this is the account of how the olden times began, and of the era that in the annals of the golden era by the name it was known, and how from Nibiru to earth the missions went the missions to earth to obtain gold happened. The escape from Alalu from Nibiru was its beginning. With great understanding was Alalu endowed. Much knowledge he had learned. He learned much knowledge by his forefather Enshargal of the heavens and the orbits. Much knowledge was amassed. By Enchar was acknowledged, greatly augmented. Of that Alalu made much learning with the sages he discoursed, savants, and commanders he consulted. Thus was the knowledge of the beginning ascertained that Alalu had learned. The gold in the hammered bracelet was the confirmation. The gold in the hammered bracelet of gold in Tiamat's upper half was the indication. At the planet of gold, Olalu victoriously arrived in a high chariot with thunder crashing. So, a loud spaceship comes crashing down. With a beam, he scanned the place, his whereabouts to discover. So, he there again, Olalu comes down in his ship, his UFO, scans a beam down, and then decides that where he's going to land. The same thing that he did before when he decided there was gold there. He shot a beam down. I mean, this is amazing stuff here. 5,000-year-old text talking about UFOs and shooting beams down. Crazy shit. High chariot on dry land descended. At the edge of extended marshes, it landed. He put on an eagle's helmet, and he put on a fish's suit. So he put on an eagle's helmet. That's funny. And a fish suit. So he put on something where he could swim under the water. The chariot's hatch he opened. At the hatch, he stopped to wonder. Dark-hued was the ground. Blue-white were the skies. No sound there. No one to bid him welcome. Alone on an alien planet he stood, perchance from Nibiru, forever exiled. To the ground himself he lowered. On the dark-hued soil he stepped. There were hills in the distance. Nearby, much vegetation there was. Ahead of him there were marshes. Into the marsh he stepped. By the water's coolness he shuddered. Back to the dry ground he stepped. Alone on an alien planet he stood. With thoughts he was possessed of his wife and his offspring, and with longing he remembered them. Was he forever exiled from Nibiru? Of that, again and again, he often wondered. To the chariot, or the spaceship, the UFO, he soon returned with food and drink to be sustained. Then deep sleep overcame him, a very powerful slumber. How long he slept he could not remember. What awakened him he could not tell. A brightness there was outside, a brilliance on Nibiru unseen, the sun. A pole from a chariot he extended. With a tester it was equipped. It breathed the planet's air. Compatibility it indicated. The chariot's hatch he opened. At the open hatch he took a breath. Another breath, then another. The air of Ki, indeed, was completely compatible with Nibiru's. Olalu clapped his hands. A song of joy he was singing. Without an eagle's helmet, without a fish's suit, to the ground himself he lowered. The brightness outside was blinding. The rays of the sun were overpowering. Into the chariot he returned, a mask for the eyes he donned. He went and got his ass some sunglasses. Good call. Glad you had those with you. Smart thinking. Always carry sunglasses when you go to an alien planet. Okay? Put that on the fucking board. Always carry fucking sunglasses when you go to an alien planet. Smart move. I'm glad we had some sensible people in our ancestry here. He picked up a weapon that he carried with him, and he picked up a handy sampler. What's a handy sampler? Got a little bit of everything in there. Oh, I got a gun. I got me a laser beam. I got me a tractor beam. I got all kinds of stuff in here, man. To the ground he himself lowered. On the dark-hued soil he stepped. He made his way towards the marshes. Dark green were the waters. By the marsh's edge there were pebbles. Olalu picked up a pebble and thrust it into the marsh. In the marsh, a moving, his eyes glimpsed. The waters were filled with fishes. Into the marsh, the sampler he lowered and looked at the murky waters. For drinking the water, it was not fit. Olalu was greatly disappointed. He turned away from the marshes in the direction of the hills he went. He made his way through the vegetation. Bushes gave way to trees. This place was like an orchard. The trees with fruits were laden with fruits. By their sweet smell, they enticed him, and Olalu picked a fruit and put it in his mouth. It was smelled very sweet and tasted very sweet, and he was greatly delighted. Away from the sun's rays, Olalu was walking toward the hills. He set his direction. Among the trees, a wetness under his feet, he sensed, a sign of close-by waters. In the direction of the wetness, he set his course. In the midst of the forest, there was a pond, a pool of silent waters. Into the pond, the sampler he lowered. For drinking, the water was good. Olalu laughed, and unstopping laughter seized him. The air was good. The water was fit for drinking. There was fruit. There were fishes. What more did he need, right? Well, let me go find something I can bang and we'll be all set. You know, I got food. I got fucking water. I can breathe air. Now I need something to put my dick in. So, you know, that's pretty much where we're going next. Got to be. He's a man, right? He's got his food. He's got his shelter. What's he need next? He needs vagina. And boom, here you go. That's how the human race got here. The end. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Just kidding. Boom, that brings us up to date. That's how we got here. Some dude, you know, with a big ego crashed on an alien planet, found some food, found some shelter, found breathable air, found something to fuck, and bam. This is how life was created. I don't know, we'll just walk into a classroom and teach that, you know. All right, kids, here we go. We're going to learn about creation and evolution today. Here's how it happened. 5,000 years ago, an alien, drunk-ass, horny, egotistical alien crashed on Earth. He missed his wife and his kids. Mostly he missed his wife because he couldn't get any poontang. And, you know, he found some fucking fruits and berries and some water and some breathable air. I was like, this is badass. Now I got to get my dick wet. And that about brings us up to date, kids. We'll have a quiz on this on Friday. Be sure and tell your parents what we learned today, okay? You guys be safe. Thanks. So, yeah, this guy's like, you know, living it up. Now I got to go. I just need to find something to have sex with. The daughters of man. That's what he's going to have sex with. Yes. With eagerness, Alalu bent down. Together, he cupped his hands and put the water in his mouth. It had a different taste from the water of Nibiru. Once more, he drank, and then with fright, he jumped. A hissing sound he could hear. A slithering body by the poolside. That was a fucking snake, dude. We got snakes down here on this planet. All that technology and laser beams and, you know, shooting beams down to see where the gold is and shooting beams down to see where the optimum landing spot is. All that fucking technology couldn't save you from a fucking water snake. Now, could it? I mean, you know, that really, it's funny because that's what, you know, that sort of seems like what the elite do, what the New World Order does. It's that kind of shit, you know? You guys can pull off all these operations, but you had a fucking brain between you. It's just, didn't count on that fucking snake, did you, Bubba? He seized the weapon that he carried and blasted away. Oh, you pussy. Shot the snake with a fucking laser beam. The moving stopped. The hissing was ended. To examine the danger, Alalu stepped forward. The slithered body lay still. Dead was the creature, a sight most strange, like a rope its long body was, without hands or feet. Fierce eyes were in its small head. Out of its mouth, a long tongue was sticking. A fucking snake, dude. A sight on Nibiru never beheld it was, a creature of another world. Was it the orchid's guardian? Alalu by himself pondered. Was it the water's master himself, he asked. In his carried flask, he collected some water and made his way back to his flying saucer. The sweet fruits he also picked and took them back to the flying saucer as well. The brightness of the sun's rays were greatly diminished. Darkness it was. So he crashed out in the UFO. The shortness of the day, Alalu pondered. Its shortness amazed him. So not used to our orbit, so the days are much shorter. So you age a lot quicker. From the direction of the marshes, a cool lightness on the horizon was rising. A white-hued ball in the heavens was rising. Kingu, the Earth's companion, he now beheld. What in the accounts of the beginning his eyes, the truth could now see? The planets and their orbits, the hammered bracelet, Ki, the Earth, Kingu, its moon, were all created, all by names that were called. In his heart, Alalu knew one more truth that needed beholding. The gold, the means of their salvation, needed to be found. If truth be in the beginning tales, if by the waters the golden veins of Tiamat were washed, In the waters of Ki, it's cut off half. Gold must be found. So essentially now I understand what they were saying. Earth, Ki, was actually a part of Tiamat that was cut off from. Very interesting. It's not really what you hear oftentimes in the research community and stuff. Very, very interesting stuff. With hands unsteady, Alalu, the tester, dismantled the chariot's pole. With trembling hands, he donned the fish suit. The fast-arriving daylight eagerly awaited him. He left the chariot, the UFO, at daybreak and quickly stepped into the marshes. Into the deeper waters he waded. Into the waters he inserted. Its illuminated face he eagerly watched. In his chest, his heart was pounding. I mean, it's funny. Its illuminated face literally is describing this, device having a screen on it. You're going to sit here and tell me some guy 5,000 years ago in Samaria just made that up? I mean, if you don't believe anything else, I mean, the idea that he's, looking at an illuminated face of this tester, wondering what it's going to tell him. I mean, that's a screen. How did that guy know to describe a fucking LCD screen or a display screen 5,000 years ago? I mean, that question alone, out of all of this, should have everybody in the scientific community wondering what's going on here. Its illuminated face he eagerly watched. In his chest, his heart was pounding. The water's contents was indicated by the tester by symbols and numbers its findings disclosed. Oh, right there, he's looking at a screen. Then Alalu's heartbeat stopped. There is gold in the waters, the tester was telling him. Unsteady on his legs, Alalu stepped forward. Deeper into the marshes he made his way. Again, the tester into the waters he inserted, and again the tester announced that he had found gold. A cry of triumph from Alalu's throat emanated. Nibiru's fate was now in his hands. He made his way back to the UFO. He took off the fish suit and occupied the commander's seat. The tablets of destinies that knows all orbits he enlivened to Nibiru's orbit to find the direction. The speaker of words he stirred up toward Nibiru the words to carry. Then to Nibiru words he uttered. Thus he was saying, the words of the great Alalu to Anu on Nibiru are directed. On another world am I. The gold of salvation I have found. The fate of Nibiru is in my hands. To my conditions you must give heed. So right there, he's basically blackmailing them. He's saying, I found it. I found the gold. I found what can save our planet. How badly do you want it? Because if you want me to come back and save our planet, then you're going to have to, when I come back and bring it, I'm king and I get to be in charge, and because hey, I'm the one doing the hard work, all the work, right? So that's the end of the second tablet of the Lost Book of Enki. And tomorrow on the show, we'll get into the third tablet. Well, the synopsis of the third tablet, which is coming up next. And then obviously the third tablet after that. So I guess next we're going to be getting into him finding, the daughters of man and getting his groove on and doing a little, genetic crossbreeding to create slaves to mine the gold. Fascinating stuff here. Lost Book of Enki. Again, I don't always read everything that I read, and always stuff I always agree with. I'm not reading this because I endorse it or I agree with it. I'm just reading it because it's highly interesting, and we are, I think, by reading it like this and sort of dissecting it and going through it day by day and page by page, I think it gives us all, myself included, you, more of an opportunity for us to decide for ourselves what's bullshit and what's not, instead of somebody just telling us, oh, Zecharia Sitchin, he's, CIA, and yeah, he was, blah, blah, whatever, but still, let's decide that for ourselves. Let's go through this. Let's see if we can get anything out of it. We'll call what's bullshit, and we'll take the rest and go about our own merry way. We don't have to fucking buy into anything or support, this clown or his ideology, what he stood for, or anything else. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why we've been told not to look at this is because this is indeed what mankind is supposed to know, so we don't repeat those same vicious cycles. And with the knowledge of this stuff, mankind would know that this happened in the past and this is where we're heading, and we would pull ourselves out of that before we had a chance. That's why they will not let us have this info. And that, again, is why the whole, operation of the phony controlled patriot movement, truth movement was set up. Because they knew when people started looking forward towards conspiratorial topics, they'd eventually get into this stuff. But that's why you hear Alex Jones, Alex, that stuff's a distraction. Talk about the bankers, folks. Just quacking it up, running block, being the cock block for the priest class. Keep on doing it, Bubba. People are awake now. A lot more people have figured this out, and that, to me, like I talked about last night, that's the fight. That's what we got to do. We got to continue to try to get this information out to people and let them know that what these elite and these priest class bozos are hiding at the very top is they're hiding our birthright. They're hiding our information. They're giving us these phony things like, the phony state of Israel and, telling us that these people over here are the Semites when it's not actually them, and they're going to killing the other people that are actually the bloodline descendants of these ancient civilizations. I mean, it's just insane. But it's all happening because of our sheer lack of knowledge of things that we've never been allowed to know. If we had a history of what had happened on other planets where possibly our forebears came from, and that they had gone down the same route we did, we might see that and go, oh, man, they fucked up. We don't want to go that route. We got to change things. If we were to do that, there'd be no more New World Order. There'd be no more power structure. So you see, this is why this is important. That's why I implore you to look at this information and, as usual, decide about it for yourself. This is the account of the judging of Alalu and of the happenings thereafter on earth and on Lamu. In his reed hut, Anu was hurting. In the reed hut, to him, Enki applied healing. In his reed hut, Alalu was sitting. Spittle he spat from his mouth. So he's sitting there like, spitting shit everywhere. In his innards, the malehood of Anu was like a burden. Ugh, that sounds gross. In his innards, the malehood of Anu was like a burden. He had the malehood of Anu inside of him. With Anu's semen were his innards impregnated, like a female in travail his belly grew. A dude got pregnant like Arnold Schwarzenegger from Anu, like the god of the Anunnakis. Oh, God, I'm sorry, dude. I feel for you. I mean, maybe you should, keep the back door closed more often. I don't know. Ugh. This is some sick stuff in here. On the third day, Anu's pain subsided. His pride was greatly hurting. To Nibiru, I wish to return. Yeah, get me out of here with these ass fuckers, please. To his two sons did Anu say, beforehand upon Alalu, there must be a judgment, a sentence, the crime befitting must be imposed. By the laws of Nibiru, 7 judges were required, the highest rank of them to preside. In the square of Eridu, the heroes were assembled. The trial of Alalu they were observing. For the 7 who judged, 7 seats were provided. And they provided the tallest seat of all to Anu. Yeah, because he's a fucking giant, right? To his right was seated Enki. On the left of Anu, was seated Enlil. On Enki's right, Anzu and Nungal were seated. Abgal and Alagar to the left of Enlil sat. Before these 7 who judge Alalu was brought, his hands and feet were united. Enlil was first to speak. In fairness, a wrestling match was held. Alalu, the kingship to Anu, was forfeited. What say you, Alalu? Enki asked him. In fairness, the wrestling match was held. The kingship I forfeited, Alalu said. Having been vanished, Alalu, an abominable crime performed. He bit the malehood, the cock of Anu, and swallowed it. I'm not making this up. It literally says this. So he did a Mike Tyson on him, only he didn't go for the ear. He went right to the cack and bit the fucker off and swallowed it. You heard that about, like, what was it, the Isis, Osiris, Horus thing, Like Set cut off the penis of Horus or something like that and fed it to this fish. I mean, what was up with these guys? I'll make sure that fucker never comes back. Cut his cock off. Feed it to a fish. Jesus. Thus, Enlil made an accusation of the crime. Death is the punishment, Enlil said. What do you say, Alalu? Enki, his father by marriage, asked. There was silence. Alalu did not answer the question. We all witnessed the crime. Alagar was saying judgment must be in accordance. If words you wish to utter, speak before the judging, Enki to Alalu said. In the silence, Alalu slowly began to speak. On Nibiru, I was king. By right of succession, I was reigning. Anu was my cupbearer. The princes he aroused. So he turned on the males, the princes. To a wrestling match, he challenged me. For 9 counted orbits, I was king on Nibiru. To my seed, kingship belonged. On my throne sat Anu himself. To escape death, I made a dangerous journey to the distant earth. For the salvation of Nibiru, I, Alalu, discovered the alien planet. Return to Nibiru, I was promised, in fairness, the throne to regain. Then to earth came Ea, the one by compromise, the next to reign Nibiru, he was designated. Then came Enlil, the succession from Anu to himself he claimed. Then Anu came, and he tricked Ea a lot, and Enki, the Lord of the earth, he was proclaimed. Of earth, not Nibiru, to be the master. Saying, this is your domain. That's why Ea, earth, is called earth. It's the realm of Ea. That's what it means. Nobody ever thinks of where that term comes from or why we call the earth, earth. It's the realm of Ea. The first 2 letters of earth are Ea. Ea. Hello? If that's not enough to bitch slap you out of your comatose state, I don't know what is. And just people go through their everyday lives never even knowing that fact or even, questioning it. But it's a fact. Of earth, not Nibiru, to be the master. Then to Enlil, the command of earth was granted. Enki was delegated to the distant Abzu. My heart of all that was aching, my chest from shame and anger was bursting. Then Anu placed his foot upon my chest and it began to tread upon my aching heart. In the silence, Anu spoke up. By royal seed and law, by fair wrestling, did I gain the throne. My malehood you bit off and swallowed. My offspring line to discontinue. Enlil spoke up. To the crime the accused admitted, let the judgment come. Let the punishment be death. Death, said Alagar. Death, said Abgal. Death, said Nungal. Death to Alalu by itself will be coming. What he had swallowed in his innards, death will bring. Enki said, let Alalu rest of his days on earth be imprisoned. Anzu was saying that their words Anu was contemplated. Anger and pity engulfed both of them. To die in exile. Let this be his judgment, Anu was saying. So in other words, banish him to earth. And that would tie into the whole thing we were talking about earlier. They banished Alalu to earth and then created the etherical barrier the Valent radiation belts around him here. At least that's how I understand it. Very interesting. We'll see if this indeed tells us that. That's what I understand, though. In amazement, the judges at each other glanced. What Anu was saying that they wondered, neither on earth nor on Nibiru shall the exiling be, Anu was saying. On the way there is the Lamu planet. With waters and an atmosphere it is endowed. Enki, as Ea, thereon made a pause. Of it as a way station, I have been thinking. That's supposedly supposed to be Mars, I believe. The way station was Mars, from what I understand. Its net force is less than that of Earth forceful, an advantage and wisdom to be considered. In the celestial chariot, Alalu shall be taken. On my departing from earth, with me he shall make the journey. Around the planet Lamu we shall make the orbit. To Alalu a sky chamber we shall provide. To the planet Lamu in it he will be descended. Alone on a strange planet in exile he shall be. His days to his last himself shall count. Now, this, what did he refer to it as? The sky chamber? Could that possibly be what, this guy found on Mars? Could that be what the face on Mars is? Highly interesting that, they would banish him there, the way station. We know that they referred to the Mars as the way station. Very interesting that we have Cydonia on Mars, which is what ancient Mesopotamia, what is now Iraq, used to be called. Iraq, Cydonia, Mesopotamia. It's located on the 33rd degree parallel on Earth. Cydonia on Mars is also located on the 33rd degree parallel, and that's where these pyramids on Mars are also located. It's very likely that that's what that was. Thus did Anu utter the words of judgment. In solemnity, the words were intended. By unanimity, it was a unanimous decision, let's just say that, to impose this judgment upon Alalu. In the presence of the heroes, it was announced, let Nungal be my pilot to Nibiru, there from chariots bearing heroes again to earth to pilot. Let Anzu join for this journey so that he can take charge of the descent to Lamu. Oh, Lamu will be in charge of the descent down to the planet. So did Anu commandments utter. On the morning they departed, they were ready. All who departed by boats to the chariot were ferried. A place for landings on firm soil you must prepare, Anu to Enlil was saving. How Lamu as a way station to utilize the plans to utilize this you should be making. There were farewells, both joy and sorrow. Limping, Anu was limping when he embarked on his chariot. He had his hands, with his hands he tied Alalu, and then drug him into the chariot, the spacecraft. Then to the heavens the chariot soared up, and the royal visit had ended. They made an orbit around the moon, and Anu was enchanted by the sight of the moon. Toward the red-hued Lamu, which is, again, Mars. They say here it's red-hued. There you go. And they circled around it twice. Lower towards the strange planet they came, mountains, sky high, and tears in the surface, tears in the surface they noticed. Where Ea's chariot had once landed, they saw that it was located by a lakeside. Slowed by Lamu net power in the chariot, the sky chamber, they readied. Anzu, its pilot, then unexpected words said to Anu, with Alalu to the firm soil of Lamu I shall descend. With the sky chamber to the chariot to return, I wish not. So he's saying he wants to stay down there with him. With Alalu on the strange planet I shall stay. Until he dies, I shall protect him. When he dies of his innards poison, as befits a king, him I shall bury. As for me, I shall have made my name. Anzu, they will say, against all odds, to a king in exile, a companion he was. He saw things by others unseen. On a strange planet, he faced unknown things. Anzu, they will to the end of time shall say, has fallen like a hero. There were tears in the eyes of Alalu. There was amazement in the heart of Anu. Your wish shall be honored. To Anzu, Anu said, hereby let a promise by me to you be made. By my raised hand to you I this swear. On the next journey a chariot by Lamu shall circuit and orbit. Its skyship to you shall descend. If alive it shall find you, the master of Lamu you shall be proclaimed. So he's making him the king of Mars here. When a way station on Lamu's shell has been established, its commander you shall be. Anzu bowed his head. So be it. To Anu, he said. Into the sky chamber, Alalu and Anzu were ushered. With eagle's helmets and fish's suits, they were provided. Meaning suits they could fly in space in and suits they could go underwater in. With food and tools, they were supplied. From the circling chariot, the sky ship left and departed. Its descent was what they watched its descent from the ground. Then from view, it disappeared, and the chariot to Nibiru continued. I lost my place. This thing just scrolls down on me sometimes. Here it is. For 9 years was Alu the king on Nibiru. For 8 years, Iridu he commanded. In the 9th Shar, or year, to die in exile on Lamu was his fate. Now, this is the account of the return of Anu to Nibiru. So this is a new segment we're starting here, a new part, the account of Anu's return to Nibiru. And how Alalu on Lamu was buried, how in Lil on earth the landing place built. On Nibiru, for Anu, there was a joyous welcome. Anu gave his account to the council and the princes of what had happened. Neither pity nor vengeance from them all he sought. To discuss the tasks ahead of them, he instructed them all. And he outlined a great vision that he had. He assembled a great vision to let the council know about. He wanted to establish way stations from Nibiru to Earth and have all of the sun's family in one kingdom. The first on Lamu to be fashioned, the moon, for the plans he also considered, on the other planets or their circling host stations to set up. So he wanted to set up stations on moons on other planets as well. And have a constant caravan of ships just going back and forth between every planet. Sounds smart to me. We will bring the gold from Earth without any interruptions to Nibiru. Perhaps we will find gold elsewhere. So they're saying, we're going to bring all the gold from Earth, and maybe we'll find it on some of these other planets where we have way stations set up as well. The counselors, the princes, the servants, all considered Anu's plans. The salvation of Nibiru they saw in the promise of his plans. Savants and commanders' knowledge of the celestial gods perfected. They added a new kind of rocket ship, so a new technology to their chariots and skyships. So their technology apparently has already evolved at this point of the telling of the story. Heroes were selected for the tasks. I'm guessing heroes. They keep saying heroes. I'm guessing those are like, people of extraordinary strength. And for the task, there was much to learn. The plans were beamed over, I guess, sent by laser fax machine, laser email to Enlil and Enki. And they were told to hurry their preparations on Earth. On Earth, there was much discussion of what had happened and what there is to be done. Enki, Algar, to be of Eridu, the overseer, made his own steps to the Abzu he directed. Where to obtain gold from the earth's bowels, he then determined. What heroes to the task are needed, he calculated. What tools will be required? An earth splitter with cleverness, Enki designed. An earth splitter, something that would open up the earth. There within the earth to make a gash and reach its innards by way of tunnels. Could this be where these ancient underground tunnels that have been found under the earth, found in places like Dallas when they first built the city sewer system here? They found tunnels that were older than there had been people here, laser etched tunnels under the city of Dallas. Found these little green creatures in there. Yeah. That which crunches and that which crushes was the name of the machine. Of other matters, they Nibiru's savants he had to contemplate. So of matters in health and well-being of heroes, he needed to listen. To the heroes, Earth's quick circuits were upsetting. Yeah, they were not happy about the quick orbit because, they're getting older faster. So they're trying to mine this gold, and they're getting older much quicker than they would on their planet, so they can't get the job done. And that's what led to the creation of mankind as a slave race. Earth's quick day and night cycles were causing dizziness to the heroes. The atmosphere, though good, was lacking in some things and too abundant in other things. Of the sameness of the food, the heroes were complaining. We eat the same thing all the time. Oh, he eats fucking chicken. Enlil, the commander, was afflicted from the heat of the sun on Earth. For coolness and shade, he was longing. While in the Abzu, Enki was making preparations. Enlil in his skyship was surveying the extent of Eden. Of the Eden, E-D-I-N. That's the place where they were setting up Eden, E-D-I-N, what later became what we know in biblical terms as Eden. See? Of mountains and rivers he took account. Of valleys and plains he measured. He wanted to establish in Eden a landing place for the rocket ships. So the rocket ships that landed Earth landed in a place called Eden. Give me a fucking break sandwich. God damn. Enlil, by the heat of the sun, was afflicted and was searching more for a coolness and a place of shade. To the snow-covered mountains of the Eden's north side, he took a liking. The tallest trees he ever saw grew there in a cedar forest. There above a mountain valley with power beams, he flattened the surface. Is that what the tops of the mountains in Brazil, where the Nazca lines are at? Where the whole tops of the mountains are just sheared off as if by a laser? Is that what he did? Flattening the surface of this mountain valley? Very well could be. Great stones from the hillside the heroes quarried and cut to size. To uphold the platform with skyships, they carried and placed them there with satisfaction. Enlil was satisfied with the handiwork. A work beyond belief, indeed it was, a structure of everlasting. An abode for himself on the crest of a mountain was his desire. Of the tall trees in the cedar forest, long beams were prepared. Of them, the construction of an abode for himself he decreed. The abode of the north crest, he named it. On Nibiru, a new celestial chariot was soaring off for preparation. New kinds of rocket ships, sky ships, and that which Enki had designed was transporting people. A fresh group of 50 from Nibiru was taking. Chosen females were among them. By Ninmah, exalted lady, were they commanded. In succor and healing they were trained. Ninmah, exalted lady, a daughter of Anu she was, a half-sister, not a full sister of Enki and Enlil she was. She was greatly learned in the treating of ailments. She excelled in that. To the complaints from earth, she gave much attention. A healing she prepared. The course of prior chariots on tablets of destinies were recorded. And Nungal did follow its pilots. Unharmed, it reached the celestial god Lamu. It circled the planet, slowly to its surface descended. A faint beaming group of heroes followed. Ninmah was going with them. They found Anzu beside a lake shore, with signals beaming from his helmet. Anzu himself was without motion, prostrate. He lay dead. Ninmah touched his face. To his heart she gave attention. From her pouch she took out the pulsar. Upon Anzu's heart pulsing she directed. From her pouch she took out the emitter, its crystals, life-giving emissions on his body she directed. 60 times did Ninmah direct the pulsar. 60 times did the emitter. So this is some sort of crystal that puts out a frequency, and I guess after 60 pulses of the frequency, it brings an organic life form back to life. These guys have the technology to bring people back to life. Well, no wonder they don't want us to get our hands on this alien technology. There you go. I mean, because, boy, it would suck if we were able to just go over to flash a crystal in front of somebody's heart 60 times and make them come back to life, isn't it? That would just suck for this planet. Man. On the 60th time, Anzu opened his eyes. And he began to talk. Gently upon his face, Ninmah poured the water of life and wetted his lips with it. Gentle into his mouth, she placed the food of life. Then the miracle happened. Anzu rose from the dead. They inquired to him about Alalu. Anzu told them of Alalu's death. He led them to a great rock protruding heavenward from the plain. There he told them what happened. Alalu, soon after the landing, began to scream from unremitting pain. From his mouth, his innards he was spitting. In agony, he peered over the wall. He's puking his guts out, literally. Thus, Anzu was saying to them, he led them to a great rock, like a mountain from the plain, heavenward uprising. In the great rock, a cave I found. Alalu's corpse therein I hid. Its entrance with stones I covered. So Anzu was saying to them that they followed the rock and they removed the stones and entered the cave. Inside, they found what remained of Alalu. He who once on Nibiru was a king was a pile of bones in a cave now. For the first time in our annals, a king not on Nibiru has died. Not on Nibiru was he buried. So, said Ninmah, let him in peace for eternity rest. They then again covered the cave's entrance with stone. The image of Alalu upon the great rock mountain with beams they carved. So, somewhere on Mars, there are probably still evidence of that rock carving done with lasers. Now, some of the rock carvings we've seen on Earth appear to be done with lasers. Stuff we've seen in Egypt, stuff we've seen in South America, all over the place. Samir. So there again, whoever these people are, they had that technology. They showed him wearing an eagle's helmet. Oh, I see what they're saying. Now I get it. Okay. So on top of the great mountain, oh my God, this is on top of the face. The face on Mars is Alalu's face. That's why it's on the 33rd degree parallel in Cydonia, where it just happens to be where Enki set up the landing for Eden. Where was that? The 33rd degree parallel on Earth in Mesopotamia, formerly known as Cydonia, Iraq, who we've bombed and blown the shit out of and taken all their antiquities because they can't allow this info to get out to everybody. And he had a helmet on. And the guy on the face on Mars has what? A helmet. It's unbelievable. That's exactly what it was. It was a helmet. And they're saying right here that they laser etched into this rock on this mountain an image of Alalu wearing a helmet with his face uncovered. My goodness. Let the image of Alalu forever gaze up towards Nibiru, toward Earth, whose gold he discovered. That explains the face on Mars and why they've wanted to cover that up for years. There you go. So Ninmah, exalted lady, in the name of her father Anu, did declare, as for you, Anzu, to you, Anu, the king of his promise, he shall be keeping. 20 heroes with you here shall remain. The way station's building to begin. Rocket ships from Earth, the golden oars, shall here deliver. Celestial chariots from here, the gold to Nibiru, shall then transport. Hundreds of heroes shall make their abode on Lamu, on Mars. You, Anzu, shall be their commander. Thus did the great lady, in the name of her father Anu, to Anzu say, My life I owe to you, great lady. My gratitude to Anu shall not have any limits. From the planet Lamu, the chariot departed toward Earth and continued on its journey. So that's the end of, I guess, the fourth tablet. The next chapter is the synopsis of the fifth tablet.